Okay, folks, looks like all of our technology is on track. We're going to go ahead and call the City Council meeting to order, 6:03 p.m., November 17th, 25. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming down tonight. Before we get started with our agenda, if you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you very much. Let's see, Ms. Trimble, can we do a roll call, please?
We can. Good evening. Beginning with Anderson. Absent. Becerra. Absent. Campbell.
Here.
Carlino. Absent. Krask.
Present.
Farmer.
Present.
Jones.
Present.
Jordan.
Present.
Nelson.
Present.
Nugent.
Present.
Sherrill.
Present.
And Basika.
Present.
All right, and we do have a quorum this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have approval of minutes from November 10th of 2025. Any changes or questions from council members on the minutes as submitted? No? All right, not seeing any, then those will remain as submitted. Thank you very much. Next, we have our committee schedule for this coming Wednesday, November 19th. Ms. Trimble, any changes or updates to that committee schedule as posted?
No changes.
Okay, great. And as a reminder, folks, you can find all of the City Council committee schedule and various committee agenda item attachments on the City of Missoula website for City Council meetings. All right, so next we have special presentations and proclamations. And we don't have any neighborhood council updates. And Claire, for the record, I want to just let you know that Councilor Becerra has arrived. She's here with us. Hi. Okay, so we have one special presentation this evening, and that is for our friend Mark Haka. So as somebody of a bit of a celebrity, you may know that Mark Haka has retired after 42 years in broadcast journalism. And so we are here today to proclaim Mark Haka Day. Whereas Mark Haka has spent 42 years in broadcast journalism, including 26 as Missoula's most experienced and respected meteorologist. And whereas Mark Haka has been an active and engaged member of the Missoula community for decades, serving as a board member of many local nonprofits, including Missoula Children's Theater, Open Aid Alliance, the Western Montana LGBTQ+ Community Center, and as a founding member of the Missoula Gay Men's Chorus. And whereas over the years, Mark Haka has lent his talents as a delightful MC or entertainer to benefit many good causes, including Blue Mountain Clinic, Missoula Art Museum, Missoula Community Chorus, and Missoula Sunrise Rotary. And whereas Mark Haka is a tireless advocate for the city of Missoula, always championing it as the very best place to live, work, and play. And whereas Mark Haka is a beloved local figure. Now, therefore, I, Andrea Davis, Mayor of the City of Missoula in the state of Montana, hereby recognize the 19th day of November 2025 as Mark Haka day. And Mark is with us in the audience. And Mark, I would love to have you come up and say a few words if you're willing to do so. Or anybody that's willing to come up and share a few bits. I know excellent. Yes, Gary Bowman, my apologies. I knew that you were here. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it. All right. And before you get started, Mr. Bowman, Ms. Trumbull, Councillor Anderson is in the house. So she's here for attendance, please. Thank you. All right. Excellent. Mr.
right.
Bowman, thank you.
Thank you. Mark is one of those people that wherever he goes, whoever he meets, and they want to know something about the weather, he volunteers it wholeheartedly. His pores exude weather. He is courteous, polite, and he is a relentless advocate of Missoula, Montana. He always used to say, well, I'm going to go home for Christmas. And I say, no, you are home. And your community loves you, and he absolutely loves this community. Mark, could you come up here for a minute? So anyway, in recognition.
One of the founding members too of the Missoula Games course.
Excellent. That's great to know.
2000.
And Mark is such an incredible member of our community. Happy retirement.
Thank you.
And doing a little weather forecasting on my own. I'm hoping all your future days are filled with sunshine.
Yay.
Aw.
Let's see. Lollipops. And, oh yeah. Rainbows.
Aw.
Thank you.
Very creative. Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Mr.
I
Higa.
won't take up too much of your time, but for a person to be a contributing member of a city like Missoula, you are all involved in it too. If I have exuded anything good, it is because you made me good. And Gary is right. There's only one other city that reminds me of Missoula. It's Lawrence, Kansas. But it's a very progressive community like Missoula. You guys are so open. You made, I think I spoke here a couple months ago, you made the pride flag the city flag. And that is, other towns and cities in Montana, they're probably going, what is wrong with that Missoula? But I just love you all. And I will bounce back and forth between Missoula and Kansas, but I cannot disconnect, entirely from you all. So I love you guys and everyone. This is just a great town. It is the only place in Montana where I want to live. And I have done so for almost 27 years. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Higa, and thank you for your years of amazing service. I get to be the one that says you have made the phrase or the word grapple famous. So thank you for that. We wish you the very best in retirement. And again, thank you for making weather so, it is a very interesting concept, and we appreciate your professionalism in meteorology. And we know that this won't be the last we'll see of you, because we know you consider Missoula home. Come on up. Yep. Come on up into the microphone if you would, please. Absolutely, you bet.
How did I get my interest in weather? September 20th, 1967, a tornado formed and was about a mile west of our farm. I was 7 years old, and my dad said, grab something important and run to the cellar. And I grabbed a cat and a hula hoop, and that began my interest in weather. So
Wow,
I just
all right.
thought that would be an interesting side note.
Absolutely, most definitely is. All right, take care. Thanks so much for being here tonight. Congratulations. All right. So that's our only noted special presentation, but I do just want to take a minute to outline the flow of the meeting tonight. We have a number of community members that are here for likely various agenda items this evening. And since many of you have been here, there has been a slight change to our city council agenda. So there are now 2 times on the city council agenda that you can make public comment for items that are not on the agenda. And so the first is a 20-minute slot at the beginning of the meeting, so that's coming up next. And I'll keep track of the full time period, which is 20 minutes. You don't you don't have 20 minutes to speak individually. So it's the same rules that apply. Every person that comes up to the microphone will have 3 minutes to provide public comment on items not on the agenda. And we did ask folks to sign up first for that. There is, this was at the front of the room coming in, but we'll make sure that if there's other folks that want to speak on non-agenda items at that time after these 3 folks have gone, that there'll be time for that. And then we'll roll from, and I'll help you keep time on your public comments up here. Then we'll roll into 3 public hearings this evening. So public hearings, again, there's another opportunity for public to comment on those agenda items as we move through them. So we have 3 public comments this evening. One, though, council members, as you saw on your agenda, is simply a public forum from another local jurisdiction, and this is through Missoula County Public Schools. Interestingly, this may be the last public forum that you hear where you do not vote because there was a legislative change. This has been a long-standing state legislative requirement where a local body like the City Council is required to take public comment on items they don't have any decision-making authority or space on. And so there was some change in regards to that. So we will have a public comment on the CS Porter dynamic sign display. Then we have a phased development review and phasing plan for Aspire subdivision phase 1 through 6. I do want to mention that this, we ask that public comment be limited to the agenda item. So this is on the phased development review and the phasing plan amendment. And then our last public hearing will be a rezone of 1010, 1020, and 1030 Reserve Street. So after we get through our public hearings there, and again, the public will have an opportunity to comment on each of those. Again, 3 minutes per public comment. I'll help you track that time. And then we do have some new business, just setting a special meeting of City Council for December 22nd. And then in addition to our consent agenda, there is one item under regular business, and that has to do with the resolution for expanding Missoula Parking Commission jurisdiction into the HIP strip. So we've got a pretty robust agenda this evening. And with that, I'll go ahead and move to the first public comment for items not on the agenda. If I didn't mention already, for non-agenda items, folks are permitted to give comment once. So we do have a few folks that have signed up, and Sarah Giuliani, you are first, so come on up.
Sarah Giuliani. The proposed Southgate Crossing development has no plan for affordable housing, but does plan to raise trees for more commercial space in a sea of commercial space. This is contrary to the Missoula culture that protects and reveres our natural environment. If not for community members who are forward-thinking, we wouldn't have the Rattlesnake Wilderness, North Hills, Jumbo, and so much more. When we walked the land, my dad put it perfectly when he said, "This is an oasis in the middle of town." According to the Missoula Current article, Missoula's CAO said of this oasis, "Our goal here wasn't to have a beauty contest of what the development would look like. Rather, we wanted a developer that was fully aligned with what the city wanted." The developer said to the Missoulian, "I'm hell-bent for leather." Based on the documents I've read, many of the city's wants do not seem in alignment with the community's needs, and this hell-bent mindset leaves little opportunity for public input. Stephen Hunt, a photographer, musician, and a descendant of a number of Native American tribes in Montana and Idaho, spoke at a Missoula Community Land Trust Forum. He said, "To be a good ancestor is to make decisions today that affect the future tomorrow." This is wisdom to take to heart, especially during these tumultuous times. SNAP benefits cut, healthcare premiums increasing, and a local childcare center shut down last week. All the more reason to be forward-thinking with this publicly owned parcel to create more protections and safety for our community and land. We don't have control over the federal government, but we do have local control. I understand the sense of urgency in the present moment to build, but this can't be justification to bypass public engagement. When people have agency and shared decision-making, community connections grow. We invest in each other and the common goal and are healthier as a society because of that. When people feel disenfranchised, dismissed, and like their voices don't matter, the seeds of distrust are sown, which can lead to a breakdown in community and a myriad of social ailments. Southgate Crossing has me thinking of this larger question. How do we want to move forward as Missoulians? Does senior leadership proceed with their plans but let citizens pick where the park bench goes to give the appearance of public engagement? Or will this community be allowed to participate in a meaningful way? As the city grows, will decisions be imposed upon us, or will local government let citizens lead and be of, by, and for the people? I would like to end with this quote by Mayor Davis. When you engage with your growth plan, lean in heavy on engagement. Bring in people, go to them, because they are so much more engaged and it affects their lives every day. You can't have a conversation too early. Don't let this get so far out that you can't do anything about it. And I thank you for saying that, and I thank you all for what you do, and I know it's a lot of time and effort, and I do appreciate that. And so thank you.
Thank you for your comments this evening. Ms. Giuliani. All right, Katie Thompson? Katie Thompson, come on up.
Katie Thompson. We've come together as a group of citizens who care deeply about our community and the natural world. We hope to not only better understand the details of the proposed Southgate Crossing development, now being called Midtown Commons, but to be active participants in the final vision of this land. We have generated a list of questions for you and your team. We preface these questions by stating that we have spent hours collectively reading through documents and are well informed on what has been made public thus far. Land agreements and development proposals we request for review. Number one, the exclusive agreement in this entirety that the city currently has with Miramont Companies. Number two, the purchase and sale agreement Miramont Companies has with the city. We need to see this as soon as possible and before any sale is made. Number three, the final 6 to 7 proposals submitted by the other developers interested in Southgate Crossing and the city's reasoning for declining their proposals. Finances and number of units, traffic flow. If TIF dollars are requested for infrastructure and approved by the MRA, how much money is set aside for this? Number two, will there be a tax abatement given to the developer as part of this sale? Number three, what is the total number of residential and commercial units proposed? Number four, what is the anticipated number of vehicles this area can expect with the increased density? Number five, what is the traffic plan and where will the designated parking be? I know when a lot of the answers we get is we don't know yet. We're still in that, decision-making process. And I guess the whole issue is we would like to be part of this process and informed. Since you've used our tax dollars to purchase the land, I do think we should be involved and have eyes on to know what we're saying yes to and to meet the needs of the community, because that was how it was proposed to us, that this was being done so that the city would have a say and better meet the needs of the people here. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Thompson. All right. Next up, Gwen Hoppy. Hoppy.
I'm Gwen Hoppy, and I live in the riverfront area, but I've been following the Midtown project partially for an understanding of the process of that the city council goes through and that citizens can interact with. And from this, I see something that needs attention. I know you don't have the Midtown project in front of you yet. It's still being worked on. There'll be a hearing sometime. But I think some things need to be addressed before that time. And the people before me have spoken to the same issue. And if I can quote from the page 4 of the Missoula Economic Partnership about the process. The city expects the selected development team to either lead a public process to engage the community and gather feedback on the future development of the property, or allow the city to lead this process. These efforts can be in partnership with the city and similar to other processes that the city has conducted in the past. Well, the city's very good at this. And I did go to the open house, and I was surprised that there was no place to talk about the development itself. Oh, you could talk to the people who had the booths on the different topics, but there was no public discussion of it. The only place that the public had a place to comment was on the park itself. There's no discussion on how big the park should be, what it's next to, and things like that. You know, where it should be, you know, should it include the trees or anything? That will happen later. On Wednesday, there's going to be a workshop put on by the Parks Department and others for the community, especially the neighborhood, to gather to talk about how that park should be. But at this point, they don't even know what's going to be next to it. And so I think I was kind of surprised because it sounded like the development itself is a done deal. That's just up to the developer. The city must have had some conversation with them about it. I know there's people say, oh, it's, we've had all this comment on the Midtown Master Plan, and so we got all our information from there, but there's a lot that's not quite on it. I see my time's almost up, but I'd encourage you to have a public discussion sometime before the hearing so we can interact on it. And I'd encourage just citizens to get involved with what's happening with all the developments in town, not just what's in your neighborhood. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Hoppy. All right, we do have about 10 minutes left in this public comment period for items not on tonight's agenda. Any other members of the public wishing to make public comment on non-agenda items?
My name is Barbara Pulley, and I'm from the Southgate neighborhood near the Southgate crossing. The Missoula Economic Partnership listed site considerations on the Southgate crossing. Environmental assessments on 3 parcels in the northwest corner nearest the railroad tracks listed subsurface compressible wood fill on the site due to historical sawmill operation. Missoula Economic Partnership stated this may present a technical challenge for construction. I'm also giving you, I've got 8 copies of a Newfields map that shows where there's more recent wood fill up to 15 to 20 feet deep on properties directly south of Bob Ward's. Missoula Redevelopment Agency states that it's been tested with minimal issues. Really? So what remediation will be needed, who will pay for it, and what would be the estimated cost? Does this exclusive agreement with the developer, Miramont, spell out remediation and specific infrastructure? What is the developer's plan to build in an environmentally considerate manner? There is a proposal of rerouting the ditch. Again, who will pay for it and at what cost? With a recently completed post study and increased density coming to Midtown, why is a larger park not being prioritized by you? Missoula Economic Partnership's park requirement is a public park and a public gathering place to enhance community engagement, which would indicate a much larger park for 300 plus housing units. Would the city consider retaining part ownership of a portion of the parcel for the park and allow for a larger green space? Can the city retain some of the natural habitat as a nature preserve? Has the city contacted an ecologist about the impact this development have on the natural environment? In your rush for workforce housing development with this developer, the City Council has not given any information for the public review and comment. What are your requirements or stipulations in this exclusive agreement? We need a public forum to discuss it, more than just an inadequate survey through the Engage Missoula. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pulley. Any other members of the public wishing to make comment on items not on the agenda?
Hi, my name's Mary Giuliani, and I am with these amazing group of women that have worked so hard on this, reading through all of the documents that are online, going back through years and years of documents and discussions about this land. So thank you. You are engaged, informed citizens, and I've learned a lot from you. So I just want to start there. In continuation with the questions that we have about this land, first I'd like to say, if you have not gone there, if you haven't walked the land yourself, please do. Go walk around the land, see it for yourselves, walk around the neighborhood, see what is there, and see if that matches what this proposed development is and how this development will impact that neighborhood. So I'm going to talk about some of the socioeconomic and social considerations. There is a socioeconomic vulnerability assessment that is embedded within the Midtown master plans, all the documents. It's really important, if you haven't read that particular assessment, please do. It also leads me to a larger question about how much money we're spending on studies when we're not actually following what the studies indicate. But the first question that we have is, Mayor Davis declared November as Native American Heritage Month. One section of the proclamation reads, "We acknowledge the ongoing impacts of systemic racism and intergenerational trauma that have resulted from historical injustice directed towards Indigenous populations, including forceful removal from homelands and appropriation of land within boundaries of sovereign nations through purchase by non-Native people." Did the city seek input from any Native American leaders or community members about what their vision may be for this parcel of land? Did the city consider the land back movement when they were considering this parcel of land that they have? Given that this is publicly owned land, has the city reached out to a local community land trust organization for their input? Moving on, notable findings within the Midtown Master Plan. Increase opportunities for attainable home ownership. Purchasing a home in Midtown is becoming increasingly out of reach for lower income households and groups who have been historically excluded from home ownership opportunities. Tools to create paths to attainable home ownership should be developed and supported as a critical way to stabilize households. Part of this also talks about partnering with affordable housing developers and existing service providers. Quote, "Decision makers implementing the Midtown Master Plan should join forces with affordable housing developers and nonprofit service providers to advance conversations about continuing and expanding these services and incorporating them with new development projects."
Thank you for your comments this evening, Ms. Giuliani. Okay, folks, we have 3 minutes left if there's anybody else wishing to make public comment on items not on the agenda in this first section.
Hello, Carrie Schreiber, Southgate Triangle. Might as well keep this whole conversation together. We spent a lot of time this weekend handing out flyers to the local neighbors that'll be affected by the development to invite them to participate in the park process. Until that point, there had been nothing physical around the land or with the neighbors. Emails had gone out to area schools and the Interfaith Collaborative and whatnot, but nothing, no signs to engage the people that have been actually using this land for decades as a neighborhood space. One of our Southgate leaders drove around and put up the sandwich boards. Parks printed off 4 signs for us, and we got them to print off 4 more. We generally will have 10 sandwich boards up for weeks on both sides when we're trying to notify about a meeting. So this was all within a week. Got lots of flyers, handed those out to neighbors, and we're just hoping that people will be getting the information. It's confusing to me that why there wasn't that type of direct engagement until our leadership team initiated it. In going around and talking with folks, we did hear disappointment about the size of the park and heard people that are already building and planning on getting out of the area.
when I spoke with Parks Department, they mentioned, oh, you're talking about this parcel that's been privately owned. Well, this has been 1/3 public owned this entire time. And if I'm following the acres and the numbers, it looks like the developer is going to be able to build on more acres than what the city purchased back in November because of wrapping in those easements. And it does appear that the only way that we could have vacated these easements was through having the city be the middle person of buying the properties and then selling the whole bunch to the developer. We've had a lot of questions that we've brought to you, and I do hope that we may have the opportunity to have a forum and have a more thorough conversation about what we want as a community moving forward with this. And it just doesn't make any logical sense to those around the area that we need more commercial space and that would be a priority over park. Urban Renewal 3 brings in so much money already. We can say that the MRA has been successful in helping to help this blighted area, but it's really short-sighted to have 1.3 acres of park.
Thank you for your comments this evening, Ms. Schreiber. That does wrap up our public comment for items not on the agenda. So we will move on to our public hearing schedule this evening. Our public hearing schedule this evening starts with item 6.1. I'll just give a little description here of the process for public hearings. State law and city council rules set guidelines for inviting community comment in a formal way on certain issues. Following a staff report on each item, the city council and the mayor invite community comment. City council holds a public hearing on the item. A member of council makes a motion and a vote is taken. The public hearing and vote take place on the same night unless there is a reason to hold the vote to a later meeting date. So the first item is item 6.1. That's the public forum for dynamic display sign at CS Porter. We have a staff report from Claire Lovelace. And as I mentioned previously, this is an oddity in the sense that City Council will not be voting on this item and a motion is not applicable. Claire will explain that further in their staff presentation.
Okay, hello and good evening. I'm Claire Lovelace, a planner in the Community Planning, Development and Innovation Division. CPDI has received notice from Missoula County Public Schools of their intent to place a dynamic reader board sign at CS Porter Middle School located at 2510 West Central Avenue. The proposed project includes the installation of a dynamic reader board sign that will be approximately 25 square feet in area and 14 feet off the ground. Missoula County Public Schools is a government agency and City Council is authorized to hold a public hearing when an agency proposes to develop or use public land contrary to Title 20 zoning regulations. In this case, Missoula County Public Schools is proposing a sign that does not meet the sign chapter of zoning. The public hearing is known as a public forum. Per state law, Council does not have a decision-making role and will not vote on the item. The purpose of the public forum is for Missoula County Public Schools to take public comment on their proposal. Missoula County Public Schools is authorized by state law to move forward with the proposal following the public hearing. CS Porter Middle School is located at 2510 West Central Avenue on the west side of South Reserve. The ground sign will be placed on the southeast corner of the property near the intersection of Reserve and West Central. The proposed location is marked with the red star on the map. CS Porter Middle School is currently zoned RT 2.7 residential. Parcels to the north are zoned RMH residential manufactured housing park. Parcels to the south are zoned C1-2 neighborhood commercial and within the design excellence corridor typology 4 overlay. There's a few parcels to the south that are county zoned 12A residential and then NR neighborhood residential. Parcels to the east are zoned C1-4 neighborhood commercial and B2-2 community business and are within the design excellence corridor typology 4 overlay. Parcels to the west are county zone 12A residential. And schools are a permitted use in the RT 2.7 zoning district. The applicable regional plan is the 2045 Our Missoula Land Use Plan. Per the land use plan, CS Porter Middle School's place type designation is urban mixed use high. This designation is intended to support a high number of residents and types of businesses and provide a wide range of diverse housing and building types in which people can live, work, and play. Surrounding place type designations include urban mixed use high, limited urban mixed use, and urban residential low. There is a concentration of office, commercial, and residential uses surrounding CS Porter Middle School. The surrounding uses of the school are compatible with the place type designation outlined in the land use plan. The RT 2.7 zoning district is not a current relatable zoning district in the urban mixed use high place type designation. Title 20, Section 2085-95 and state law states that government agencies may propose to use public land contrary to local zoning regulations. Whenever an agency proposes to use public land contrary to local zoning regulations, a public hearing must be held to allow for comment on the proposed use, and the agency shall attend the public hearing. City Council does not have the power to deny or condition the request. This means that there will not be a vote on the item. Missoula County Public Schools may move forward with the sign proposal following the public forum. However, they may consider comment. Title 20 defines agency as a board, bureau, commission, department, and authority or other entity of state or local government. Missoula County Public Schools are considered a local government agency and are permitted to vary from zoning through the public forum process. Here are images of the proposed location of the ground sign. There are existing poles from a previous ground sign. These will be used for the proposed dynamic display sign. Here is an image of the proposed sign. The proposed sign is approximately 25 square feet in area. The proposed sign will be located about 14 feet off the ground. The sign will be a double face illumination with an RGB message center. The size and orientation of the sign intend to message families and the public on events and important dates happening at the school. The sign will not comply with 3 requirements of zoning code. The dynamic display sign will be located in the RT 2.7 residential zoning district, which is not normally permitted. The proposed sign is larger than the maximum allowed area in the RT 2.7 zoning district. The maximum allowed area is 24 square feet, and the sign is proposed to be 25 square feet. The proposed sign exceeds the maximum permitted area by 1 square foot. Additionally, the sign will be 14 feet off the ground, which exceeds the 6-foot height maximum in the RT 2.7 zoning district. Lastly, zoning code requires that the dynamic display portion of a sign not exceed 50% of the total sign area. The proposed reader board will be entirely dynamic display. Staff does not have a recommended motion as no action is required, but city staff and Missoula County Public Schools are available for any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lovelace. Do we have any questions from council this evening? Not seeing any questions from council. Then we'll go ahead and take there's really no motion to be made, so we just go right into public comment. So we do offer an opportunity for public comment on this agenda item. Any members of the public wishing to comment on this agenda item? Not seeing any in the room. Are there any online? Okay. You have a comment, Ms. Hoppy? Come on up. Sure. And make sure you please identify yourself again. Thank you.
Gwen Hoppy, also not my neighborhood, but I wonder what the neighbors think, because have they asked them? What do they think about the big sign? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments this evening on this agenda item?
Katie Thompson, yeah, I just wondered what factored into the decision to go with a higher than standard height of 6 feet and going up to 14. Yeah, that's the only thing I would be curious about.
Thank you for your comment. You bet. Anybody else wish to make public comment on this agenda item? Okay. Not seeing any in the audience. I'm not seeing any online. All right, that wraps up our public comment for this particular agenda item. And so it comes back to City Council for any of your, another opportunity for questions or any comments you may have. All right, I'm not seeing any from City Council either. We'll make sure that we get audience public comments to Missoula County Public Schools. And as mentioned, this is not a decision for City Council. There is no public vote here for City Council, so we'll move on to item 6.2. All right, it's the Phased Development Review and Phasing Plan Amendment for Aspire Subdivision Phases 1 through 6, and we have Dave DeGrandpré here to present on this item.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Good evening, councilors and members of the public. Again, my name is Dave DeGrandpré with City of Missoula Development Services. So tonight is a public hearing on the request from developers of the Aspire subdivision to amend the phasing plan for that subdivision. Property is 35 acres in size. It's located in East Missoula. Adjacent to the east is the Clark Fork River. To the south is Interstate 90. And to the west and north is developed property within the unincorporated area of East Missoula. The property is accessed from Summer Street to the south and Waterside Drive to the north. Historically, the property has been used as an irrigated farm field. In August of 2024, City Council approved or annexed and zoned the property, applied a neighborhood character overlay zoning district to the base zoning district, and also approved the preliminary plat of the Aspire subdivision, subject to 35 conditions of approval. The subdivision consists of 182 lots for approximately 250 dwelling units. The developer is responsible for creating new city streets with treed boulevards and sidewalks throughout. There are 2 public parks totaling 4.13 acres, one along the eastern boundary, which is where the Clark Fork River is located, a riverwalk type trail with trees and multiple access points. And then on the western side of the property is a more traditional type park located adjacent to Canyon View Park, which is a county park. The subdivision is intended to be served by city water and sewer with stormwater contained on site. And again, council did apply a neighborhood character overlay to the base zone. The conditions of approval actually are relatively standard for the most part, but there are some that are unique to the property. For one, improvements to Summer Street. The developer is required to improve Summer Street from the property about 2,200 feet to its intersection with Highway 200, to include 2 driving lanes, 2 parking lanes, curbs and gutters, and sidewalks on both sides of the street. Also, I mentioned the paved trail atop the riverfront area and other park improvements like irrigation, sod, trees, amenities, things like that. The water rights were required by council to be dedicated that are pertinent to the property that were used for irrigated agriculture over the years are required to be dedicated to the city to help with irrigation of the park areas. And then in addition, upgraded off-site water mains would be necessary to maintain fire flows in a portion of East Missoula as well as on the subject property itself. But otherwise, the conditions are quite standard. So along with the subdivision approval, council approved a phasing plan. So each phase on the screen that you can see shown in a different color is intended to be filed, the final plat filed in 2-year increments starting at December 31st of this year, and then proceeding every 2 years after. Final plat filing is significant because that's when the lots are actually created, can be sold, etc. And each phase includes streets, sidewalks, etc. However, just following, let's see, I'm trying to change the screen. Here we go. Just following council's approval, East Missoula residents appealed city council's decisions on annexation, the neighborhood character overlay zoning, and the preliminary subdivision approval. There have been, in the ensuing months, there have been several motions, briefings, etc. And so far, Judge Larson has dismissed all of the claims related to annexation and subdivision. However, there is still an outstanding item, and that is council's decision to approve the neighborhood character overlay zoning. So that's still winding its way through the judicial process. A quick side note, City Council is currently, or will shortly be looking at a new unified development code to include subdivision rules, zoning rules, public works rules, et cetera. And once a new zoning is adopted, it may make the neighborhood character overlay judicial issue, the appeal, moot, because the way the text is written currently, the existing zoning, the base zoning and the overlay are basically going to be rescinded and replaced with a new city zoning. At least that's the plan at this time. Nonetheless, the appeal is proceeding. So given the uncertainty surrounding the judicial appeal, the subdivider has requested to postpone filing of the phases, with the first phase, instead of being filed by December 31st of this year, pushed back 3 years to the end of 2028, which with each of the subsequent phases still filed in 2-year increments. So essentially it just pushes back the phasing plan by 3 years, and no other changes to the phasing plan have been requested. Now, this phasing plan amendment falls under the section of Montana Code delving into phase development. And this section of state law, it allows for City Council, upon request of the developer, to amend a phasing plan. But first, Council must hold a public hearing and determine whether there are any changed primary review criteria impacts or new information that would result in significant adverse impacts. If council makes such findings that there is new information or changing conditions that would either negate or should result in elimination or modifying or adding new conditions of approval, council may do so following a public hearing, which is what we're doing tonight. And so planners sometimes use funny words like primary review criteria impacts. And what we're talking about is these are the primary review criteria for subdivisions. So it's the growth policy and zoning, agriculture, agricultural water users, facilities, et cetera. And so I'll go through those, try to be brief, but there's some detail that's necessary to talk about whether there are new impacts that exist or that we have found at the staff level, and go through those. So first, the Missoula 45 land use plan, which is the growth policy for this area, council adopted in December. And it provides what's called a place type map or place type designations. And so place types, what they are, they're like a future land use designation. So what is the future for a particular area? And they cover lots of things. It's the intended physical outcome for an area that really makes recommendations for things like future streets, blocks, lots, land uses, development intensities, et cetera, in relation to the transportation systems in place. And the place type for almost all of East Missoula is urban residential high, and that includes the subject property shown with a star on the screen. And this urban residential high place type is intended for complete, compact, and walkable neighborhoods that provide a wide range of building types for ownership or for rental, and includes small neighborhood scale businesses serving local residents and visitors. Properties within the urban residential high place type range from small lots for single homes to larger parcels that can allow for larger multi-dwelling structures. The streets are typically gridded blocks, and these areas are intended to be served by transit and feature a balanced mix of transportation modes. So in this case, transportation modes, I'm referring to things like automobile transportation, walking, so sidewalks, possibly bike lanes, things like that. And so staff has found, is indicated in the findings of fact and conclusions of law in the staff report, that the project, Aspire project, really largely complies with the vision outlined for this place type as indicated in the land use plan and is detailed in the staff report.
All right.
And I'm trying to switch the slide.
Okay.
There we go. It'll be up shortly. Okay. So the zoning that council approved, it's still in effect. Again, this is the neighborhood character overlay for Aspire along with the base RT 5.4 residential zoning. Nothing has changed in this case. since adoption. I did read a public comment saying that the lot sizes, there's a potential new zoning that council will shortly consider called Urban Residential 3. And that has a minimum lot frontage or lot width of 40 feet. The transitional provisions of the draft zoning specifically exempt lot width and area from new subdivisions. It also has a transitional provision in the text saying that if a preliminary plat is approved under old rules, those final plats can still be filed and the lots can still be developed. So really it's not particularly consequential to this review. The next criteria are agriculture and agricultural water user facilities. Again, there really hasn't been any change since council approved the project or the preliminary plats. Back in 2024, the property was used for irrigated hay production. Soil types haven't changed. Water rights haven't changed. So really no unique findings here. With regard to local services, again, really not a lot of change. Project still can be served by water and city water and sewer. Solid waste is available. Law enforcement and fire is available, and we have no reason to believe that any significant impacts to schools would result from the project in any way that has changed since August of 2024. Transportation elements, there is a bit of change, but in summary, all streets and alleys are still going to be or proposed to be built by the developer and dedicated to the city in phases. Summer Street improvements from the subdivision to Highway 200 are still planned and are the responsibility of the subdivider at phase 1. That hasn't changed. However, when we reviewed the project back in 2024, the city and county had received federal grant funding for improvements related to Highway 200, a segment of which, of course, goes through East Missoula and connects with Summer Street. Approval at that time, if you go back and look at council's adopted findings of fact and conclusions of law, the project really wasn't predicated, or the approval wasn't predicated on that grant funding or potential improvements to Highway 200. However, after looking at public comment, the traffic impact study, talking with public works and mobility staff, we do feel that there's an issue. Funding for those improvements, really, we don't know where that money's going to come from right now. And over time, we still hope that the plans to improve Highway 200 will come to fruition. And so staff is recommending modifying a condition of approval, condition number 3, as follows. So the condition that this is a standard condition that we apply to all subdivisions. It's basically all new lot owners must waive the right to protest the creation of a special improvement district for improvements to streets that serve the subdivision. And so you can see in red what we're proposing to change. And so those improvements would be for future improvements and maintenance of the intersection of Summer Street and Highway 200, Montana Highway 200, as well as Summer Street, Deer Creek Road, and the roads within the subdivision. So what this all means is that if an improvement district is created to help fund Highway 200 related improvements, typically local governments use an improvement district where it's a geographic area where landowners within that area get a voice or a vote, so to speak, as to whether they're going to form this district. When a property owner waives their right to protest the formation of this district, essentially they're yes votes to form the district and help fund the improvements. So that's what staff is recommending. Is condition number 3 it's already one of the conditions of approval, but we're looking to amend it or recommend that council amends it to include those specific improvements to the intersection of Summers and Highway 200, as well as Highway 200 itself. And all conditions of approval must be based on findings of fact. And so staff is also proposing a new finding of fact, basically describing the situation that in 2024, the city and county had received funding to improve Highway 200 through East Missoula. Planned improvements include left turn lanes and medians with crosswalks, but that funding is no longer in place. And so to ensure that the Aspire residents contribute a proportional share to fund the improvements, staff recommends a condition of approval requiring the lot owners to waive their right to protest the formation of an improvement district. So that's what the change condition of approval would be predicated on. And then just a couple more moving on, back to the review criteria regarding the natural environment, wildlife, and wildlife habitat. Really no conditions have changed since August of 2024. And same thing with public health and safety. There's still no human-made or natural public health and safety issues that we're aware of. The property can still be served by police and fire. Water and sewer are still available, et cetera. So in summary, there are minimal, and this is staff's conclusion, minimal new or changed primary review criteria impacts or new information that creates new, potentially significant impacts. There's little new information that negates any conditions of approval or otherwise adversely affects public health, safety, or welfare, and only one changed condition of approval is recommended. And finally, this is staff's recommended motion for City Council. In red is a modification from the original motion that we proposed because we're proposing to amend condition number 3 as I described earlier. And that concludes my presentation for now.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. de Grand Prix. And before we go to council questions, are there any comments from the developer or developer's representative? Come on up.
Hello, my name is Brian Throckmorton. I'm with 406 Engineering. I could repeat everything Dave just said. He said it great, so I'm not going to do that. I think the biggest thing is we just want to get an extension so that the lawsuit can have time. And we don't really know how long that's going to take. Now, it may be done in January. It may be done 2.5 years from now. But the whole idea behind the extension is really just to have a start date when there's not a lawsuit pending. And so that's really what we're asking. And if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Throckmorton. Appreciate that. Appreciate you being here. All right, we'll bring it back to council questions then. And Councilor Nugent.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. We've received a lot of public comment in the last 24 hours on this. A lot of it is very similar to the public comment we heard in the review phase a year ago. I was hoping that City Attorney Sudbury could maybe explain to council what the decision space is. Sorry for the awkward turnaround and not look at you so I can be speaking into the microphone. But kind of explain what the decision space is to set the expectation for everybody in the room, what council is able to determine tonight and what they aren't, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So as Mr. de Grand Prix went over and mentioned briefly, there is criteria laid out in state law. Currently, we're still governed by the Subdivision Platting Act. The city hasn't adopted the UDC yet, so we're not fully under the Montana Land Use Planning Act. So under 76.3.617, the subdivider may change the schedule for review of each phase of the development on approval from the governing body if the change does not negate conditions of approval or otherwise adversely affect public health, safety, and welfare. So that's kind of your first threshold. And then, as Mr. de Grand Prix also highlighted, the governing body may amend or impose additional conditions of approval only if it determines, based on the review criteria, that the existing conditions of approval are inadequate to mitigate the potentially significant adverse impacts based on changed circumstances. So you would need to find a changed circumstance and that the original condition of approval is inadequate to mitigate the potentially significant adverse impacts. And those would need to be tied to that first criteria that I outlined, that that it would adversely affect public health, safety, and welfare. So those two things are obviously connected, but that's kind of the nexus of your review criteria to their requested extension. Did I get there?
Yes, for me, yeah. Hope if anybody else, they can ask. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Councilor Melson.
I actually do have a follow-up to that. Apologies for the awkwardness, but I guess I was surprised to see that the loss of a $24 million grant, which was just rescinded earlier this year, is considered a minimal impact. And I'm just wondering if we can provide examples as to what does constitute a material change that would trigger a renewed review rather than an administrative extension. Because to me, the loss of a $24 million grant, it seems more than minimal, I guess.
Well, I don't think anybody, I mean, Dave may be the more correct person to answer this. I don't think anybody's arguing that the loss of the grant might not have a substantial impact somewhere. It's just a question of whether that was a condition of approval and a material change in the conditions of approval. So as Dave, I think, tried to highlight, none of the conditions of approval were, based on, none of the conditions said something like, based on the anticipated federal funding and improvements to Highway 200, we don't think that the additional trips generated by this development will have an impact on the neighborhood or the city or the residents or the general health, safety, and welfare. If it had made a finding of fact or conclusion of law that those improvements were necessary to be in place to mitigate the additional traffic volume, then I think we would have a situation where you are dealing with a material change in circumstances that the conditions of approval were set to mitigate, and that that you might find that the mitigation was no longer acceptable. Thinking of other examples, this development is adjacent to the river. If there had been a massive flood or eroding of the riverbank that would cause significant loss of the property or change in the river dynamics in this area, that would be a change in circumstance that may necessitate a review of this. If there had been a significant wildfire in the area that burned houses or changed the nature of the infrastructure in the area, collapse in water sewer mains, something like that, that would be something that the subdivision condition was reliant upon and knows that change. That would be a material change in circumstances that I think would justify additional conditions of approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sudbury. Any follow-up?
I do have one follow-up.
Sure, go right ahead.
And Dave, staff, you did a great job with this presentation. And I just want to go back to the part about the overlay. And we just passed a land use plan, our Missoula, last year. So will extending this plat kind of lock in a design that is out of sync with that land use plan? And you touched on this, but I just would appreciate if you go back and talk about why that overlay was put on in the first place, and then what will happen to it, and kind of the mechanisms for what happens to it, I guess. If you could go back and cover that, please. Thank you.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So when council first annexed and applied zoning, council applied the baseline like a standard Title 20 zoning district called RT 5.4 residential. And so that is a single family and two family type structure zoning district. An average of 5,400 square feet per lot over the entire subdivision. So it doesn't mean that each lot has to be 5,400 square feet in size, but over the entire subdivision, it averages out that way. And then in conjunction with that, so it's a fairly limiting zoning district in that it is, there are very few land uses that are allowed and very few different building types that are allowed, essentially detached structures and 2-unit structures. So in order to provide some greater flexibility, the developer, in terms of building types, the developer requested and staff and council supported what's called an overlay zoning district. And so this is a zone that lays on top of, it's an imaginary layer essentially that lays on top of the base zoning that provides additional flexibility. It could be used for different purposes. Sometimes it's used to preserve the integrity of or the character of a neighborhood that already exists. Sometimes it's used to provide some flexibility in a new zoning district that is distinct. It's kind of a neighborhood unto itself. And the flexibility provided by this overlay zoning district was to allow for reduced setbacks, so buildings could be placed slightly closer together and slightly closer to the street than what's normally allowed under the baseline RT 5.4 residential district. It also allowed greater area for parking in the fronts of structures, so along the streets. And then further, it allowed for 10 of the lots to have multi-dwelling structures. So not just single family, not just duplex, but multi-family structures on 10 of the lots in the south. So really, that's the extent of it. It's not a huge change in terms of different land uses or intensities or what have you, and could be built elsewhere. So council decided to approve it in order to provide kind of greater opportunities, more of a mixture of housing types. And then we're undergoing the UDC process, Unified Development Code process, where new zoning will be applied. And it's not just, obviously, it's not just to this project, it's citywide. And so it's a citywide effort to meet a lot of different goals, as detailed in the land use plan and the documents that you've seen so far. So the new zoning that's proposed is more intensive than what's allowed currently in this, or what was in the current zoning. So it will provide some more freedom, but essentially these lots could be developed just as proposed originally, and just under the RT 5.4 zoning with this neighborhood character overlay. So these plans could move along just as they were proposed. But I mean, I guess I'll just have to say that, on any lot in town, in the municipal boundaries of the city, the new zoning will apply. And so the new zoning it's intended to provide more opportunities to increase housing, to have smaller units, and things like that. So different standards that focus on building form, et cetera. So that effort obviously is not unique to East Missoula or the Aspire subdivision project. It's a citywide effort intended to accomplish, or help accomplish at least, a lot of the city's land use and planning goals.
Thank you so much.
All right. You bet. Any other council questions? Not seeing any? All right. Not seeing any additional questions from council, then we'll go ahead and hear a main motion from Councillor Nugent, please.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. I move City Council approve the phase development review and phasing plan amendment for Aspire subdivision phases 1 through 6, subject to the conditions of approval and based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law in the staff report as amended by City Council.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So the motion is on the floor. This opens the public hearing. Again, this is a public hearing on the phase development review and phasing plan amendment for Aspire subdivision phases 1 through 6 as presented this evening. And so we'll open this up for public comment on this agenda item. Anybody wishing to make public comment on this agenda item?
Well, my name is Bruce Baxter. I've been a Missoula County homeowner for 36 years. The city of Missoula has identified me as one of 37 homeowners who are adjacent to the Aspire property. Dave DeGrandprix gave us a little different staff report tonight than he gave us last week, so I'm going to try to respond to the new one. On the subject of both public health and safety, there is new information that does create adverse impacts for the subdivision and for the rest of East Missoula. That is, there is now currently no money to make the safety improvements on the highway or intersection, as you know. He mentioned there will be special utility districts, hopefully to make the new residents of the property pay for this improvement. I seriously doubt there's any way they're going to come up with anywhere near $24 million to improve the highway and the intersection. On top of that, Aspire's own traffic study stated after the safety improvements, issues at the Summer Street Highway 200 intersection will likely still remain above the desired condition. That's just a sugar-coated way of saying the new Aspire traffic will create hazards. There's also a second item of new information that creates adverse impacts. That is, there are now 15 new multi-story housing complexes with their own additional traffic numbers built or being built along East Missoula's 0.8 mile long length of Highway 200, with more planned plus the massive 252 housing units hoped for by Aspire. Aspire's traffic study was based on 2021 traffic numbers before this additional multi-story housing traffic was added to Highway 200. This new information does adversely impact the safety of the subdivision and all of East Missoula. East Missoula's traffic plus the multi-story housing traffic plus this proposed Aspire traffic will outgrow the capacity of our old highway and have multiple negative impacts on public safety and health for traffic, bicycles, and pedestrians. The density of the current Phase 1 plat only adds to the problem. In 2024, the City County Planning Board voted unanimously 5-0 to reject the original housing plat for several reasons. All three Missoula County Commissioners strongly urged the council to retain current protections of the Clark Fork River by reducing the housing plat. I think David DeGrandprix's recommendation is short-sighted as best. It ignores the obvious additional new adverse impacts and does not follow the city's own guidelines. I ask that the council reject the 3-year extension and instead request a new, less dense housing plat that reduces the safety and health risks. The city council can do something to ease these problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baxter. Other public comment on this agenda item this evening? Other public comment on this agenda item, come on up.
Good evening, I'm Lisa Thomas, been an East Missoula resident for 24 years now. And I've been here before about this subdivision, but also now with this new UR high place type zoning that this will, I guess, move towards. And under the old one, you could have anywhere from 3 to 11 units per acre. That's a difference of 105 homes on this plot or 385 on this lot. Now they've gone to the middle, 7.1, which puts them at about 248 to 252 was the word on that same lot. That has still not changed. The highway will not change. The road of Summer Street will not be enough. And they kind of said, well, 10% are going to go over on Waterside Drive. You can't tell people where to drive. They're both public streets. If 80% want to go down Waterside Drive, you can't stop them. So I don't know why that is even a factor. You can't tell people where to drive. But they seem to say this study will help with that. Well, when you see 15 cars on Summers, where are you going to go? You're late for work. You're going to go down Waterside Drive. It's really not that dependable for the traffic. I will reiterate all of the apartments. There are still more being built too, as we speak, developments on Highway 200. And when is this all going to create chaos, death, wildlife interference, and all of those things? I appreciate the questions you asked on the changes to this. One of the things I wanted to read. This was from your packet. Sorry, I'm using my sticky notes. You are supposed to be considering open space, yet you are cramming all these homes into this spot. You're supposed to keep a neighborhood scale. This does not match the East Missoula neighborhood scale. I live in what was considered a high-density neighborhood at the time. It's the same size as this Aspire lot. We have 123 units. They have 252 on the same size acreage. So that's more than twice. And you can drive through the Hidden Trail neighborhood. You can see what that looks like right now. And then imagine in 10 years when you put 252, double the size of my neighborhood in that lot. And that's what we're going to have. And I guess this new zoning could allow even more. And it includes something that I read this in your packet, that this will increase the percentage of front yards that can be used for vehicle parking.
Thank you for your comments this evening, Ms. Thomas.
Thank you. I'll be living in a neighborhood where you can park on your front lawn and pave it over. Not for
Anybody else for public comment this evening wishing to make public comment on this agenda item?
Hi there, first time making a public comment. My name is Thomas McCormick.
Mr. McCormick, you can adjust that microphone up if it's more comfortable for you.
Certainly, yes. So I've lived in Missoula all my life. I'm 32 years old and I've lived in Missoula for 32 years. Same house, actually, right across just one down from the other. I'm going to bring up some points that I think is probably on a lot of people's minds right now. First question being, are people really going to give up the land for bigger streets and higher traffic? I kind of did a little bit of research on this, and basically you can basically pay people to get rid of their land, and if they don't take that offer, you guys got to force it on them, which means you got to pay more money. So where is that money going to come from? We're already having questions of where's money going to come from for other projects that were mentioned before this one. So if we can't find money for that project, how are we finding money for this one? Now, that brings up to another question. Do you not expect opposition from these people? Like, I don't think anyone is really going to be down for getting rid of all their land. As is, a lot of people park on the streets, don't have garages, and if you're like me, you barely make ends meet as it is with a good job, and you start your own business to make ends meet. How many more businesses do we need in Missoula for people to make ends meet? Because that's the point we're getting to. You got to start your own business to make ends meet. Financial impacts on this, what's it going to do to people's livelihood? It's going to raise costs of property taxes. It's going to raise the cost of living. And as is, it's already high. Yes, we do need places for people to live. We need to be able to increase, dwellings. But also, people want to own their homes. Not everybody just wants to rent their entire life. I'm fortunate enough that I got handed down a home from my family. And if I didn't, I can confidently say I'd be homeless today. Because I don't have the means to be able to work like other people do. And when I do, it's later in life, when I've finally been able to, because I have a disability. I do have Asperger's. So my development was really slow. So people who are like me in, their early 20s, they don't have the ability to have the gumption to go, man, I got to work for 40 hours a week. They might get sick after 30 hours a week, physically unable to work. Anyway, I just feel like this is a real big disconnect of what the government wants and what the people want. And that's basically all I have to say today. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments this evening, Mr. McCormick. You're welcome. You bet. Anybody else here wishing to make public comment on this agenda item?
Hi, my name is Tony Ward. I'm a resident of East Missoula, and I live literally right across in my backyard is where this Aspire neighborhood will be built. I'm also a professor of public health at the University of Montana, so I wanted to speak to this not only as a resident of Missoula, East Missoula, but also as a public health professional. So we moved to East Missoula about 23 years ago when Mr. Summers, where Summers Drive is named after, his house was right behind where we currently live. And I just wanted to reiterate, I have some major concerns about this new subdivision without commitments to improving not only the access point to the new neighborhood, which is Summers, but also the Highway 200 corridor. Since we moved to East Missoula 23 years ago, we've seen an astounding amount of growth. That includes new homes across 200 from our neighborhood at the base of Mount Jumbo. There's the Canyon River Golf Course subdivision that's been put in. All the new apartments that now dominate East Missoula as you go into East Missoula from Highway 200, and even the new Cheyron put out the parking lot that invites additional people into East Missoula during the summer months. Importantly, this supports not only the residents of East Missoula, but you have to think about like the additional mail carriers, traffic from garbage trucks, all the maintenance and service vehicles, all of the resupply trucks that now support Ole's, the restored gas station, and then the 3 coffee shops now in Missoula. And we still don't have access to healthy foods. We're still a food desert in Missoula. So as far as land use planning, even with a staggering amount of growth in East Missoula, there's been no major infrastructure updates to accommodate all the cars on 200. And this presents major challenges. For example, just getting out of our neighborhood off of Summers. I travel Summers every single day to get out of the neighborhood. Sometimes there's like a queue of cars just to get out of our neighborhood. This is without even considering this fire neighborhood being put in. If you're getting off of I-90 into East Missoula, there's now a queue of cars that are trying to get off the freeway, trying to turn left or turn right onto 200. And now because of that, you see a lot more potential for accidents. People are, trying to scoot out there before the next car comes, or you have to wait another 3 to 5 minutes. So it's creating a really hazardous environment. Every day I witness near misses. We have pedestrians that are trying to cross the streets. Summers is right across the 200 from that new neighborhood that's back there. So now you have people that are trying to also get out at the same time as we are. So in summary, I would argue that there's still significant adverse impacts to welfare and public health.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Thank you for your comments. Other public comment on this agenda item, please. I'll remind folks to keep it to 3 minutes when that beep goes off. Appreciate you wrapping up your comments. Also appreciate you making your comments relative to the phasing plan this evening. As you know, we already did have a subdivision hearing and approval for this, and so please make your comments relative to the phasing plan. Thank you so much. Please give your name for the record and speak into the microphone. Thanks so much.
Hello again. My name is Linda.
Please get closer to the microphone there so we can hear you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Hello again. My name is Linda Ensign, and I'm an owner of property abutting the Aspire subdivision. I've reviewed Mr. Dupree's testament that he and his staff have concluded that there are essentially no changes. And if you narrow your view to just that 35 acres, it's true. The same things that made the subdivision so unpalatable to its neighbors are unchanged. Thanks to the overlay, it is still too dense. It still allows building too close to the rivers, and Summer Street is still supposed to bear the burden of 90% of the 2,000 plus traffic units per day that is produced by the subdivision. Mr. Dupree mentioned that the grant monies for the improving Highway 200 are no longer available, and if you widen your view, you will see that indeed that is a major change. Widening your view a bit further, you see a large new apartment complex has been nearly completed in Ole's parking lot, and another apartment complex is under construction on the north side of Highway 200, and numerous duplexes and fourplexes have popped up on the south side of the highway. Additionally, just a little research found applications allowing apartment complexes at 3614 Highway 200 and a 107-acre development of mixed-use residential and commercial at the Old Bonner Post Yard, which would use both Highway 200 and I-90. The continually increasing traffic on 200 seems underappreciated. In the last 3 years, there have been at least 2 incidents when traffic accidents on I-90 caused traffic to divert to Highway 200, making both roads impassable. From the accident to Bonner for hours. This is a health and safety issue, and while Aspire will not be wholly responsible for it, the Planning Commission will. I urge you to allow this phase to expire. Go back and try again with a plat that is more in line with the circumstances outside the subdivision's boundaries.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Anson. Other members of the public wishing to make comment on this agenda item?
My name is Bob Yeomans, and I live in East Missoula. It occurs to me that using a traffic study from 2022 and all of the things that have happened in East Missoula since then, it might be prudent to put in an amendment that would request another more current traffic study so we could understand the 200 issue and whether it's not really an issue as Mr. DeGrand Pre says, or whether it is more of an issue that the East Missoula people know about that he doesn't. And the other thing that I'm unclear about, and it's my own ignorance, is that the amendment to have the people that buy lots pay for something about Summer Street, and I was under the understanding that the developer was going to pay for the improvements on Summer Street, and so what is it that the people will be required to pay for exactly? Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yeoman. Appreciate your comments this evening. Any other members of the public wishing to make comment on this agenda item? Come on up.
My name is Steve Farmer. I'm a longtime resident of East Missoula. I've been there since 1973. Anyway, the way I see this, because it's right in my backyard, Summers property. I knew the family, grew up with them. Anyway, it's going to make a huge impact on the wildlife, the river, people around there, the community. It's going to be a big mess. I don't know how they're going to fix that road, that little road from Broadway, where Van Buren is, through East Missoula, clear to Bonner. That road's not going to handle that load of people. That's not going to happen. You guys are going to have to figure out something there, because it's just not going to work. There are going to be a lot of people killed in wrecks and all kinds of stuff. And at night, when people get off work, they like to get their kids, their baby buggies and their dogs, and go for a walk at night. How's that going to happen when you got 252 more people or whatever coming back there? And then when you put Summer Street out there, when they put the sidewalks in, they're going to take people's property and make their yards smaller. So if the people don't want to sell their property, I don't know what's going to happen there. That's going to be a big fight. So you're going to take a little street called Summer Street, and you're going to put massive people on it and heavy traffic. I don't know how that's going to work. And there's a lot of kids and dogs and people there. So they need to rethink this whole thing, because what's going to happen is it's going to be a bad mess. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. Any other public comment on this agenda item?
Big K, Montana. What is this, another force fit down their throat ordeal? That's the way I look at it. Are you Chuck Schumer followers? We're going to force it down East Missoula's throat, which is actually a sovereign community, and they should be governing themselves. I ride through there on Summer Street or Speedway on the bus, and somebody mentioned how somebody's going to force the re-regulation of that street, which is so community of its own. It's not part of the city of Missoula. It's East Missoula, and you've heard from the community that you think is ignorant. No, they're very intelligent people. I would put the brakes on this, and I would look at the traffic count of those streets and intersections on the entire picture. And when you add that much more traffic, these people are speaking very clearly. You not listening to them, they should have more power of somehow better than Chuck Schumer, which would be Donald Trump, to realize that you're forcing it down their throats.
Thank you, Mr. Spitzmacher. Anybody else in the room wishing to make public comment on this agenda item?
My name is Bill Junkermeyer, East Missoula. Just following up on a couple of the comments about the traffic study that was done in 2020. The traffic study, the counts were done in 2020 for that traffic study. The subdivision approval was 23-24. During that period of time, between the traffic counts for the traffic study and the approval of the subdivision, there were an additional 500 units approved for East Missoula construction. So it's not just the 200 units of Aspire, it's the 500 units plus the 200 units plus all the additional apartment complexes that have gone up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Junkmeyer. Other members of the public, come on up.
Hi, Dustin Baker. I live on Montana and Summer Street. I guess addressing the group here, I really feel that conditions that favored the original project have changed. We had originally secured funding for the Highway 200 corridor, and that's changed as well. The traffic studies that people allude to here often cite the traffic impacts to Highway 200 and Summer Street. That's not the real impact that is to our community. Our real impact to our community is the traffic on Somers and Colorado Street. the first three-way intersection that comes from that subdivision, that sees less than traffic than any of the other area, because that's not providing access from Summer Street, all those other ones. And knowing from experience at our spot, we see maybe 200 people, less than that, a day at our intersection. So I really feel like the traffic study was diluted by where they took that point of numbers at Highway 200, because that's collecting a lot more traffic than would be coming from the city. Again, as people have said, there's been a lot more infill, new apartments, taking out of what was originally our subdivision and our community of the mobile home shotgun lots. Those are being taken out and rehomed into multi-units, multi-story lots that weren't originally there. And I guess the last thing I would say is that this property is at the front of our wildland urban interface. And what they're proposing today is a huge property with two egress options. One of them they're proposing to have less than 10% of that community leave from, and developing in such that the property and access is not there from that other egress point. If we're going to have a development of this size in this location on the WUI, we need to have more egress, or we're going to see other catastrophes like we've seen in Paradise and other communities in California. This is a bad location to have that few of egress locations. I appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Thanks for coming down, providing your comments. Anybody else from the public wishing to make comment on this agenda item? Anybody in the room? Come on up.
My name's Eli Harmon. I'm also a resident there of East Missoula for about a decade, right on Summer Street. And without rehashing everything that a lot of my fellow neighbors have already said, I guess it needs to be known that none of us are blind to the fact that the council's going to want to move forward with creating more residential areas for all the inhabitants continue to come to Missoula. The fact is that area is too small for as many that is being proposed. And so we're just trying to make it heard that that needs to be redesigned, because there's way too many houses, way too many projected vehicles, et cetera, that's going to be coming in and out of there. And ultimately, it's not fair for the existing residents, and it's not going to be fair for the ones that eventually are going to be in there as well. So that's why we are really wanting this not to be extended, because it needs to be redrawn. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. Anybody else in the audience wishing to make public comment on this agenda item? Come on up.
Hi, my name is Sean Bronick, and I am a more recent East Missoula resident. I moved in about 2 years ago. My wife and I bought a house right off of Summer Street there where Colorado dead ends. And I want to tell you a story. I drive up Summer Street every day and onto I-90 to Reserve and back, and going eastbound on my way home. There's so many near misses at the intersection of I-90, the exit, and 200. I watched just the other day, a car pulled out in front of me, and the car coming across toward Missoula had to just slam on the brakes to avoid a T-bone collision. And my neighbor Jeremy was right in the car behind me, and he saw, almost a fatal accident, or a potentially fatal accident. And this development would only add more of those, more public safety issues, more crashes. Thanks.
Thanks for coming down to make your comments. Any other members of the public wishing to make comment on this agenda item? Anybody in the audience? All right, I'm not seeing anybody in the audience, but I do see a hand raised from the public online. Kursa Shelke. Kursa Shelke, if you can unmute, I'll go ahead and time you on this side. Cursor, there you go. It looks like.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Council members, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Kirsa Shelke, and I am legal counsel for Miss Lee Bridges, an East Missoula community member and the petitioner in the case challenging the city's approval of the Aspire subdivision. I appreciate the chance to offer public comment tonight. On Ms. Bridges' behalf, I urge you to deny the requested phasing plan amendment. The subdivision's plat represents poor planning in the wrong location, and tonight's decision provides the city with another opportunity to prevent an unsafe and non-compliant development from moving forward. You have heard that minimal change has occurred since your first approval. In fact, significant changes have occurred. The city has adopted a new growth policy and has proposed a new development code rezoning this property. The legal framework governing this land has changed and will continue to change before final plat. Few changes could be more material. Additionally, you originally found that current county infrastructure was outdated and could not safely support the additional traffic from the Aspire subdivision based on a 2020 traffic study. Your approval at that time relied on future improvements, widening the highway and constructing a roundabout or traffic signal at Highway 200 and Summer Street to mitigate public safety concerns. $24 million in federal funding for these improvements has since been revoked. The public safety mitigation you relied on no longer exists, and East Missoula residents who use this intersection every day are the ones who bear that risk. Due to these material changes, primary review criteria related to public health and safety, growth policy and zoning compliance, and environmental impact are presently unmet. The city should deny the developer's request for the following 3 reasons. 1, revocation of federal funding creates new unmitigated public safety risks. The proposed change to condition 3 is not enough. 2, approving the phasing plan would advance a project that is inconsistent with both current zoning and proposed zoning. The city's overlay zoning district, as applied, functions not as a neighborhood protection tool, but as a mechanism to downgrade the base zoning for a single parcel, which is an unlawful use of the overlay to increase density that is otherwise unlawful. Moreover, the preliminary plat does not meet future proposed standards. Many lots are under the 40-foot width, there are no alleys, and driveway to sidewalk conflicts create unsafe conditions for pedestrians and children. A dense design that undermines walkability should not be grandfathered in tonight. And 3, the lack of a meaningful riparian setback along the Clark Fork River lost upon annexation perpetuates a loophole that threatens a defining community asset. The new growth policy calls for protecting the river. Extending this phasing plan would do the opposite. For these reasons, we respectfully ask you to deny the requested phasing plan amendment. If, however, you choose to approve it, we request several conditions. 1, a riparian
Ms. Shelke,
setback.
you're over your 3 minutes, but you're welcome to go ahead and submit those comments later to City Council. Thank you. Also, your public comment has been received in writing. Thank you. All right, I'm not seeing any other members of the public with their hand raised online. So we'll go ahead and we'll move back to council questions and consideration. So I'm seeing hands go up and down here. So the first one, however, I'm seeing with hand raised. Councilor Nugent, you have your hands raised? Seeing hands go up and down.
Yeah, it keeps,
Not sure what's happening.
keeps trying to put me down though, so I
Yours-
think.
Yours was raised first, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Okay, we're gonna start.
That's fine.
Okay, we'll start with Councilor Jordan, then we'll go to Councilor Nugent. I'm not really sure what's happening with our
Thank
system
you.
here.
I think there's a poltergeist in my
Yeah.
computer. But thank you for that. I just wanted to make a general comment that first of all, want to thank staff for all the hard work that they've done on this. I know it's been an ongoing issue. I want to thank all the people who've come out tonight to provide public comment. We hear you. I hear you. I also acknowledge that the decision point tonight is about extending the timeline. However, I'm going to be a no for the following reasons. We've got infill without adequate infrastructure with a loss of funding upgrades to 200, and that the subdivision only has 2 access points, plus the lack of other infrastructure, specifically sidewalks, that will see all of these new neighbors walking in the streets outside of the infrastructure upgrades required or proposed by the developer. This development does not match the character of the neighborhood at all, which is one of our criteria. I'm really concerned about the riparian zone degradation And additionally, if I remember correctly, stormwater is going to be managed with dry wells, which is just not adequate given general runoff and specifically forever chemicals, including 6-PPD, which is a chemical that adds longevity to tires, but is lethal to salmonids. And as we're at the top of the Columbia River Basin here in Missoula, our pollution just adds to pollution downstream. And I also think that our stormwater management on this development site isn't adequate in addition, given the water level of our aquifer and the proximity to the river. So I just wanted to say that I would be a no. I was a no for the general proposal, and I'll be a no tonight, maybe because of my general concerns with this development.
Thank you, Councillor Jordan. Councillor Nugent?
Thanks. Another question for City Attorney Sudbury. I know you probably don't like to speak on pending legal matters, but the lawyer for the plaintiffs, I guess, stated that the action with the overlay was illegal, which was not your opinion to us at the time. So could you maybe explain why you think that the action the council took at that time was justified?
Yeah, if you remember back when this happened, the property was in the county and it was being annexed. So at the time it was annexed, there was a zoning upon annexation that occurred. So at the same time as it was annexed, it had to be zoned to a equivalent city zoning district from the applicable county zoning district. And in that same meeting, we rezoned from the applicable or comparable city zoning district that it was zoned at upon annexation and rezoned it to include this neighborhood character. And the plaintiffs in the case are arguing that you can't do those two things at one hearing. You have to have separate hearings. You'd have to annex it and zone it with a comparable city zoning district and then leave, come to another meeting later and rezone it to the desired zoning district. So their claim, it's not clear in state law whether that's allowed or not allowed. Our argument is that it's not prohibited. It doesn't say anything that you can't do zoning upon annexation and a rezoning in the same meeting. They're arguing that you shouldn't be allowed to do that. So that's the sole remaining element that's pending in the litigation, and it's going to be up to the district court to weigh in on it.
Thanks. And could you explain a little bit about it's currently stayed's not the right word, but
what is stayed?
It's stayed pending our broader decisions on code reform.
Yes, just last week, if I remember correctly, the court granted our motion for stay in the case to kind of keep everything where it is, not make any decisions, not set any scheduling, require any discovery, or allow any motions to occur until the city makes a decision on the UDC and the new zoning. Because our arguments at that time will be that the case will be moot because the neighborhood character overlay will be repealed and replaced with a new base zoning district.
Thanks. And one more follow-up. We talked about this a lot during the subdivision approval process, but the city did not seek out this property to annex and have a subdivision. The applicant, the property owner, came and asked. Is there any provision in state law that allows a neighbor to prevent a neighbor of theirs, a private property owner, from requesting to be annexed?
Yeah, and that is certainly lying in the background of this matter. The development, even if this subdivision, if the subdivision goes away, can still be developed at the city's base zoning district with either with or without the neighborhood character overlay. I think one of the commenters pointed out the maximum density allowed in the cities, 330 some units. So it could be developed as a non-subdivision development, and there's nothing anybody could do about it. The city wouldn't, it would be a by right development. So if somebody wanted to build, say, rental duplexes throughout the subject property, they'd be able to do that without a subdivision. They just won't be for sale. You can't have lots that you could sell to individual people. There was some discussion when the lawsuit was originally filed whether the developer should just forego the city's annexation and move back to county zoning, in which case significant multifamily development would be allowed. There would be the county's riparian buffer, but there would be significantly more development that would be allowed in that parcel under the county zoning. So to get to your question, the property can be developed. It's just a matter of, is it going to be developed as a subdivision under this approval, or is it going to move forward as a multifamily or some other development under city or county zoning regulations? And there's no way to stop it. It doesn't need a city approval as part of the subdivision approval.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Counselor. And Counselor Becerra?
Thank you. I have a question for Dave, or maybe the developer's representative. Could we go over what the requirements are for a traffic study? You know, by the time the first phase, if this were to be extended, the first phase would be in 2028, the second one 2 years later, and so on. A lot of things can change, and certainly we must have some idea of the amount of development that's happening in the surrounding area that could affect the numbers and a new traffic count, and they're using those numbers for a new traffic study. Could we go over what, if that would be a requirement, since changes to the surrounding area are likely to happen between now and the first phase would be filed?
This is Dave DeGrandpre with Development Services. I'd like to bring Troy Monroe from the city's Public Works and Mobility Department into the conversation, because he's better acquainted with the traffic impact study and engineering review process than I am. Troy?
Yes, thank you, Troy Monroe, City Engineer for Development Review. So when we look at traffic impact studies, we look at full build out, what it is, and given the current background traffic, and then looking at what has been the background traffic's increases over time. So one of the things that we do look at is to see what the actual counts are that MDT and others have calculated. Here we're looking at what is Highway 200 at the west end of East Missoula. And we can see here that traffic counts after the 2020 year of COVID have been relatively constant with a 1% growth rate. Looking at the east end of town, we see something similar, and the background there, it has a 2% annual growth rate. So when we looked at their traffic impact study, it included having these similar growth rates throughout time. And then again, what would be the impact at full build outs of Aspire. So none of those things have changed any. It's still the same amount of vehicles because it's the same amount of units, and we still have the same background growth rate of the traffic. So we feel like, delaying it 3 years isn't going to make a difference in what our mitigations would be for this subdivision.
Okay. I'll chew on this a little bit more, and then maybe I'll have another question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Becerra. And Councilor Sherrill.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just curious because we're approving, if we're not approving the subdivision, we're approving that we're pushing the phasing plan out. We're allowing for more time on the phasing plan. So, and I understand that we need to be able to find significant changes in order to do that. My question, though, is that if we did not approve this today for whatever reasons we find or don't find, they could just submit a plat by the end of the year, right? Because the deadline is, I think, the 25th, or I've been reading through some of this again. Isn't it just end of the year? So they could just file the plat and move forward, and actually would move forward at a increased rate, right? It would be faster. Is that correct? And I want to be clear what we're voting on here and what would happen if we did not approve giving it more time, because that's what we're talking about. We're not actually, I mean, I appreciate all the public comment. I know you're passionate about this. I want to be clear about what's on the table right now that we're voting on. So can someone answer that question about am I correct that they would file it by the end of the year and we would just move forward, they would just move forward faster because that's what's on the table?
Thanks, Counselor. I see that Mr. de Grand Prix has his mic queued
I was
up.
hoping
And
he
then,
was gonna answer.
great. All right, excellent. Thanks for being on standby there. Pretty appreciate it. Mr. de Grand Prix.
Sure. So yes, the developer could submit the phase one, a final plat for phase one. No doubt many of the conditions related to phase one would be unmet at this time, but there'd be a back and forth kind of review process. The developer would have to find ways to meet those conditions of approval. But yeah, certainly currently the preliminary plat approval, the phase development is alive and could move forward, I guess, starting tomorrow. You know, the deadline is the 31st of December of this year. So I'm sure they could put together a final plat. It would have to go through multiple revisions, no doubt. But in any event, that's an option. At the same time, you know, like Ryan described, they could choose to not go forward with this subdivision. Now, please remember, though, that there are conditions. The city of Missoula annexed the property subject to 35 conditions as well, and those conditions mirror the subdivision's conditions. So the city could, if the developer chose not to move forward with the subdivision as approved, basically withdraw the approval. Then the city council would then have to consider whether they want to remove the property from city limits or whether they want to keep it within city limits. And, you know, once a new zoning is put in place, whether it's through the city or the current zoning in the county, you know, the developer does have options as well. For the property owner has options as well for, you know, different types of development. So I think Ryan Sudbury spoke accurately, and that there are lots of options for development of the subject property. What we're looking at tonight is a subdivision, particular development plan that both the city and the developer have put a lot of time and effort into. It's certainly not perfect, but it's something that we feel will help to meet many of the city's established goals.
Do you follow?
Can I okay. So they could meet the deadline, the required deadline by the end of the year if they chose to. Or if it went back, I want to go back to something that you said, and I do remember this from the hearing before. The county zoning, and I'm looking at you, Ryan, I know, but the county zoning actually allowed for more density than what we're talking about here. Is that correct? Other than the setbacks? I'm asking Ryan.
My understanding is that it does allow for more density and multifamily development.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Nugent.
Thanks. I had one more for Mr. Sudbury, and there was a couple of public comments that kind of implied that new zoning and code reform negates the subdivision approval, that we should start over afterwards. But that's just not accurate anywhere in the city. We're doing a citywide rezone. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so the new zoning isn't going to affect the preliminary plat approval. I mean, assume they meet their deadlines or if they get an extended deadline. What is built on those lots would need to comply with the zoning. So if there were requirements for form, because as you remember, subdivision is about lines on a map. Zoning is about what's built or allowed to be built within those lots. So there will be a change that between what was allowed and what zoning will apply when they come in for building permits at the time of it could be whenever in the future they come in for building permits on the lots. So it doesn't undo the subdivision approval because that's already done. If this subdivision went away or the subdivider decided to do something different once the UDC was adopted, then they could come in for a new subdivision review and approval and that would be governed by the UDC and the subdivision regulations that are adopted pursuant to the UDC. But as of right now, the preliminary plats in effect, their lots would be considered legal existing lots that they can build on so long as what's being built is in compliance with UDC.
Any follow-up? Okay. Councilor Milson.
Thanks, Mayor Davis. I just want to acknowledge the concerns that we've heard from neighbors that live right by Aspire related to the safety along Highway 200, along that corridor, the loss of the federal funding to improve safety along that corridor, and the project's riparian buffer related to the Clark Fork River. But tonight's decision is unfortunately not about reapproving or redesigning this development. As has been stated, the subdivision has received approval, and the question before us is whether to extend that approval window as the lawsuit runs its course. So our decision space here is really narrow. It's administrative rather than directionary or discretionary. So a yes vote doesn't endorse the project. It simply keeps the legally approved plat valid while staff and the developers address those outstanding conditions. And I just want the record to show, because I was also one of the counselors that voted against this originally when we saw it for the reasons that I mentioned. I share those concerns, I really, really do. But this is more procedural than anything. And so I just want the record to show that this is more about timing than it is about discretion and our endorsement of the project.
All right, thank you, Councillor Melson. And Councillor Nugent.
Thanks. I guess since we're going to comments, I can give mine. For better or worse, people who watch City Council regularly know I like to try and acknowledge some of the public comments and share what I know about them. I think one of the big things, and we talked about this a lot during the approval process as well, a few years back, Highway 200 has all sorts of needs for improvement that have absolutely nothing to do with this parcel or this project. It's not solely the residents of this subdivision's responsibility to overcome the loss of $24 million of federal funding. The reality is that communities pay for infrastructure unless we can find other ways to do it. And we have been very successful at getting grants, and we seem to be in an era where that might be drying up for a while, and hopefully that changes, because I've talked to a lot of people on both sides of the aisle that recognize the harm that the losing these grants is doing to our community in places like East Missoula and all over. Highway 93 is a whole nother example in our region. But I just want to make sure that we say on the record that it is not just the residents of this future subdivision's responsibility to come up with that $24 million. And the condition we're putting on is not that those residents alone have to pay for it. It's if down the road the county decided to do a broader rural SID or something, for lack of a better explainer, on infrastructure, that these lots are waiving their ability to protest that as a condition of the plat approval. So that is what that condition, that amendment tonight is. It's not saying just them, they are responsible for it. I would love to see a way for our delegation in DC to figure out how to get that $24 million back. I'm not holding my breath, but it is what it is. The juxtaposition of some of the comments from our friends with, I guess, Midtown Commons and that group, and then some of the comments on this subdivision and the comments we hear on every land use decision, is one of the things that we struggle with on council is where should things go? And it's tough because nobody wants density near them, but everybody often acknowledges that we need it on some level. That Hidden Trails subdivision was referenced, and that's one of the more affordable market rate places to buy a home in the Missoula area. So, that density is working there. But there's a lot of reasons that I think the neighbors don't like it. And again, that's one of those trade-offs that came up in public comments. There was also a comment about the food desert in East Missoula. And this council and previous councils have learned over and over again that we can zone something in hope that something specific goes in there. But unless somebody wants to run that business, we can't make them do it. We saw that up in Linda Vista, where there was hope for some sort of mixed use parcel there by the fire station, and it sat and sat and sat, and eventually somebody bought it and built apartments. Because unless somebody who wants to run a grocery store can make it pencil, they're not going to put it in. And one of the things we've heard during the code reform process from kind of this neighborhood commercial is that a little bit more density can help make those numbers work. So I don't know, but I think that comment is interesting because I agree it's something we would love to see more of, is that kind of residential commercial crossover and those walkable stores and things like that. But we aren't going to get there unless the people who run those things feel like they can get it done. And then I do just want to say, as my last comment, the condition that requires this developer to do the sidewalks all the way up Summers, my understanding is that's all in the right of way, and somebody can correct me if that's wrong. But that is all in the right of way, and we are requiring the developer out of their pocket, no public funding, to put in sidewalks. So if this development comes to fruition and they do that, this developer will be the largest contributor to walkability and connectivity that we have achieved to date in East Missoula, which I think illustrates the bigger problem. But they are going to put in sidewalks that get all the way to Highway 200. Again, once they get to Highway 200, there's a broader community issue, but it's not just theirs to solve. So I really appreciate everybody's comments. I've read every email that's come to us today. And I appreciate Mr. Sudbury kind of explaining where we are in our decision space today, because we aren't able to relitigate the whole subdivision. We're just looking at that extensions.
Thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Nugent. Are there other council comments before we go to vote? We're in council discussion. Any other council comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. All right, and we'll wrap up council comments, and Ms. Trimble, we will take a roll call vote on this agenda item, please.
Second.
All right. Voting to approve the phase development review and phasing plan amendment for the Aspire subdivision phases 1 through 6, subject to the conditions of approval and based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law in the staff report, including the proposed amendment by staff. Beginning with Anderson.
Yes.
Becerra.
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Trask.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Jordan.
No.
Nelson.
Yes.
Nugent.
Yes.
Sherrill.
Yes.
And Vasika. Can you repeat that?
Yes.
Thank you. And that item passes with 10 in favor, 1 opposed.
Okay. Thank you very much. That does conclude that item. I want to thank everybody for coming down and providing comment this evening. Also, thank you for the thorough discussion of this agenda item. And with that, we'll move on to item 6.3, which is a rezone of 1010, 1020, and 1030 Reserve Street. So we have staff member John Sand here to present tonight. And John, if you'll just give it a second, we'll go ahead and allow folks to, there's several folks that came down for the previous item. We'll just give them a second to step out, and then we'll be ready. We see your presentation on screen.
Sounds good.
All right, Mr. Sand, we're ready for your item.
All right, thank you. Hi, good evening. I'm John Sand with Development Services. This public hearing is for a rezone request received from Zach Graham of Graham Engineering, representing Ashley Carter of Squirrel Real Estate LLC to rezone the subject properties located at 1010, 1020, and 1030 Reserve Street. The property is proposed to be rezoned from B3-2 Business Mixed Use with a Design Excellence Overlay Corridor Typology 4 to C2-1 Community Commercial with a Design Excellence Overlay Corridor Typology 4. This rezoning would result in a standard zoning district under Title 20, which cannot be conditioned. Standard zoning districts must apply the same requirements to all parcels within the same zoning district equally. The subject properties are located at 1010, 1020, and 1030 Reserve Street between South 8th Street West and South 9th Street West at the intersection of Reserve Street. This is within the Franklin to the Fort neighborhood and City Council Ward 6. It's located northwest of the mall area and northeast of Fort Missoula. The Milwaukee Trail is located approximately a half-mile north of the property. Here's an aerial view of the parcel outlined in red. The three subject properties total just over 50,000 square feet in size and contain two primary structures and a few accessory structures. One of the primary structures is a detached house. The appearance of the other primary structure is similar to a detached house, but has been most recently used as an office. The property is in a developed area of Missoula on Reserve Street and is surrounded by single detached dwelling units to the north, south, and east, and commercial buildings to the south and west. Duplexes are located on the abutting property to the east of 1030 Reserve Street. The applicable regional plan is the 2045 R-Missoula Land Use Plan, which recommends a place type designation of limited urban mixed use. This designation is for an area that is developed with a strong influence from automobiles, serving as hubs for large shopping centers, department stores, and a variety of businesses. Primarily commercial in nature, these places offer neighborhood and community services with residential uses allowed. Care should be taken in managing transitions between commercial and residential uses. Buildings are predominantly medium to large commercial structures with some medium to large multi-dwelling buildings as well. Comprehensive transportation options are limited, making driving the preferred choice for most residents and visitors accessing these commercial services. Here's a page from the recently adopted land use plan for the place type of limited urban mixed use. The land use plan indicates RMH, C2, and M1R zoning districts are current relatable zoning districts within the limited urban mixed use designation. C2 is a commercial district that permits all residential building types. M1R is a limited industrial residential district that also permits all residential building types. RMH permits residential mobile home parks or manufactured housing parks. The C2 and M1R zoning districts permit various civic, commercial, and industrial uses. The applicant is requesting to rezone the subject properties from B3-2 business mixed use with the Design Excellence Overlay Corridor Typology 4 to C2-1 Community Commercial with the Design Excellence Corridor Type 4 Overlay. The proposed zoning district is consistent with the land use plan recommendation for the limited urban mixed use place type. The current zoning of B3-2 is not consistent with the land use place type designation. The land use plan calls for a focused inward approach to encourage infill development within the plan area where infrastructure already exists and promotes mixed use compact development and enhanced connectivity. Also, while limiting sprawl into sensitive and constrained lands and promoting efficient use of existing infrastructure. The proposed C2-1 zoning would increase density and permit uses in an area with the existing infrastructure served by trails, sidewalks, and bike lanes. There is no existing sidewalk along South 8th Street West. South 8th Street West dead ends approximately 400 feet east of the subject property and does not provide connection to services or other streets. There are sidewalks and bike lanes on Reserve Street. There is a curbside sidewalk on South 9th Street West abutting the subject property and directly across the street, but otherwise this portion of South 9th Street West does not have sidewalks. Bus stops serving Mountain Lines Route 2 and 8 are located within a half mile of the subject property. The parcel is currently served by city fire and police. The subject property can be served by city water and services, that's city water and sewer services. Sewer mains exist adjacent to the subject property. If redeveloped, the developer would be required to connect to city water by extending a water main from the opposite side of Reserve Street and may be required to install a fire hydrant. The subject property is currently zoned within the Design Excellence Overlay Corridor Typology 4. The same overlay would apply with the proposed rezoning. The Typology 4 corridor overlay facilitates larger format commercial development that caters to the needs of drivers while providing an edge environment that softens the visual impacts of parking and buffers pedestrians. The Design Excellence overlay requires additional site and building standards. This overlay can be found on many of Missoula's major corridors and as well as downtown. We anticipate this project to be permitted under the current code or during the transitional period, so a design excellence application would be required. If not developed under the current code, the development would adhere to the design standards implemented in the Unified Development Code. Shown here is the current zoning map. The subject property outlined in red is zoned B3-2 business mixed use. Parcels to the north and south are also zoned B3-2 with the design excellence overlay. The overlay is any of the parcels with the hatch on there. Parcels to the west, across Reserve Street, are zoned B2-2 with the overlay, design excellence overlay. Parcels to the east are zoned RT 5.4 residential. None of the surrounding zoning districts from the subject properties shown on the screen align with the land use designations from the land use plan. Oops. All right, this is the proposed zoning map. Shows the subject parcel outlined in red with the C2-1 zoning district with the design excellence overlay corridor typology 4 remaining. This requested zoning district complies with the land use plan place type recommendation of limited urban mixed use for the area and permits a broad range of uses within civic, commercial, and limited industrial classifications along an arterial street. Here's a comparison between the existing zoning and the proposed zoning districts. You can see that both B3-2 and C2-1 have a minimum parcel size of 3,000 square feet for single-purpose residential and mixed-use buildings. There's no minimum parcel area for purely commercial or industrial uses. One of the big differences here, the B3-2 zoning district requires a minimum 2,000 square foot area per dwelling unit, and C2 requires a minimum of 1,000 square feet area per dwelling unit. Under the current B3-2 zoning, this parcel would permit up to potentially 25 dwelling units. Under the C2-1 proposed zoning, the parcel could potentially allow up to 50 units. The setbacks are the same for both zoning districts. There are no setbacks for both these districts unless the parcel abuts an R-zoned parcel. In this case, 1010 and 1020 Reserve Street abut an R-zoned parcel to the east. The street side setback for the subject property along 8th Street is equal to the actual setback of the building on the parcel adjacent to the east, but no more than 20 feet. The interior side setback for 1010 and 1020 Reserve Street parcels is 7.5 feet. Another difference here we have between these two zoning districts is the maximum height. The current B3-2 zone has a maximum height of 50 feet. With the proposed rezoning to C2-1, the maximum permitted height would decrease to 40 feet. Both zoning districts allow all residential building types. This is a list of additional zoning types uses that would be allowed under the C2-1 zoning district. Some of these include building and maintenance, construction, sales and services, medium and large entertainment and spectator sports, hotels and motels, cidery, hospital, car wash, and limited and general motor vehicle repair, which is the intended use per the rezone application. The C2 zoning district allows for more auto-oriented uses than other commercial zoning districts and is appropriate for lots abutting major commercial corridors. Staff's recommendation is based on the review criteria provided in Title 20 zoning ordinance and state law. City Council must base their decision on the review criteria. The conclusions of law are as follows. The proposed rezoning complies with the land use plan and focus inward objectives, as the C2-1 district is a current relatable district of the limited urban mixed use land designation. The subject property can be served by city sewer, water, and has motorized and non-motorized transportation facilities. The subject property is within a half mile of bus stops and existing multimodal transportation infrastructure, making the property suitable for an increase in density. The proposed C2-1 zoning district would allow for additional commercial and industrial uses to serve the larger community as well as adjacent neighborhoods. Future development must comply with all applicable local, state, and federal regulations, which ensures the protection of public health, safety, and welfare. This would include a zoning requirement to provide buffering along the entire property line that abuts the parcels zoned or used for zoned residential or used for residential purposes to mitigate the possible adverse effects such as noise, lighting, or other site-related operational impacts that can occur when multi-dwelling non-residential development abuts residential areas. Since there is no change in setbacks, provisions of light and air will be remained. The rezone to C2-1 provides a decrease in maximum building height compared to the existing B3-2 zoning district. In addition, the maximum height of buildings on the 1010 and 1020 Reserve Street parcels is 35 feet at the point of the interior side setback line because these parcels abut an R-zone district. The C2-1 zoning district is compatible with the commercial uses of neighboring properties in the future land use plan for the area. The rezoning considers the value of buildings and appropriate use of land because it complies with the place type designation in the land use plan and is compatible with adjacent uses and zoning. The zoning amendment could provide for an incremental increase in housing in a broad range of uses within the Missoula urbanized area. The rezoning is in the best interest of the city because the rezoning implements the recommendations of the 2045 Our Missoula Land Use Plan for areas designated limited urban mixed use. Planning Board held a public hearing on this item on November 4th, 2025. Planning Board recommends that City Council adopt the ordinance to rezone the subject property located at 1010, 1020, and 1030 Reserve Street from B3-2 to C2-1 while maintaining the design excellence corridor overlay typology 4, based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law in the staff report. While the Planning Board acknowledged ongoing safety concerns related to traffic circulation, connectivity, and infrastructure along Reserve Street and adjacent neighborhoods, most members ultimately agreed with the staff recommendation and voted to recommend approval of the rezone. Their decision reflects both the proposal's alignment with the adopted land use policies and the understanding that future development will be guided by a traffic impact study and the Reserve Street safety plan to identify identified safety issues. Staff recommendation is City Council adopt an ordinance to rezone the subject properties located at 1010, 1020, and 1030 Reserve Street, and legally described as Lot 6 and 7 of the DC edition and Lot 1 of the Davis addition located in section 29, township 13 north, range 19 west, PMN, from B3-2 business mixed use, design excellence overlay corridor typology 4 to C2-1 community commercial design excellence overlay corridor typology 4, based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law and the staff report. This concludes my presentation. The applicant should be present tonight in case they would like to comment, or if council would like to ask any questions to them directly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sand. Would the applicant wish to make any additional comments as part of the presentation? I don't believe they're here in the audience, but how about online? Yes, Zach Graham, go right ahead. And you should be able to unmute from your side, Mr. Graham.
Okay, Mayor, Council, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like my camera's disabled, so my apologies there. Really, I have no further information. John thoroughly went through it, and just want to say I'm available if I can answer any specific questions on behalf of the applicant and about the project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Graham. Appreciate you making yourself available. We've heard the staff presentation and the as well as from the applicant, and I'll bring it to questions from council. And it looks like we have Councillor Jordan. Your hand's raised.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I've had some, this is in my ward, and I've had some neighbors reach out to me since this was presented last week. I think a couple of the questions that they have relate to that interface or that area between commercial and residential spaces. And I think a lot of the work that I've done on city council has been with neighbors who are adjacent to businesses on Reserve Street, and how there are noise violations and air quality violations and whatnot that they are encountering but aren't really sure how to have them addressed. And so I think I'm curious from either staff or for the representative for the applicant, how do we take this into consideration when a potential business use might provide a quality of life concern for the neighbors who are quite close? In fact, one of them, both of them are generally right on the property line there. And how do we make sure that their quality of life isn't directly impacted by any potential commercial use of this property?
Yeah, I can get started with a couple examples from zoning. One of those being buffers, landscape required buffers, which we often see between commercial uses or industrial uses adjacent to parcels that are either whether or not they're being used for residential or zoned as residential. If there's folks residing there, those buffers are required. So, and with this project specifically, we would see those buffers as part of the proposed design, as it's adjacent to residential uses. Another item related to traffic is a traffic impact study, which is required at the time of building permit. And with that, research and would come recommendations, some of which could be potentially traffic calming features throughout the affected areas. And then I mentioned the Reserve Street Safety Plan, which is currently undergoing in the process right now. And I did receive public comment or agency comment from the transportation team that they are looking at limiting access, such as right in, right out, installing medians to limit turn movements in this area of Reserve Street. So Unrelated to the specific project, that reserve street safety study is underway. I don't know if that answers your question, or if you'd like me to.
Do you have any follow-ups?
Yeah, look, thank you. I appreciate that. I think respectfully, the neighbors are going to have significant impact by a lot of the potential uses of this property. I did a bit of a deep dive into decibel levels of all of the potential types of commercial uses that this property could allow. In looking at tire shops and auto repair, we're looking at decibel levels of 115 decibels related to impact wrenches and air tools, grinders, and hammer drills. Auto body shops, we've got air hammers again and grinders and compressors. These are pushing 110 decibels. Car wash, we're looking at up to 110 decibels from blowers and vacuums, and on and on and on. So there are quite a bunch of allowable uses on this property where the decibel levels are going to be ongoing and high enough to cause harm and a decreased quality of life for these neighbors who live right next to the property line. And I have some concerns that buffers will not be adequate in ensuring that they're not receiving kind of some long-term auditory damage or just ongoing quality of life issues. And I am wondering, when you talk about buffers, is it just landscaping, or are we talking about a wall or something else that would allow these neighbors to not be directly impacted by these high levels of noise?
It is often landscaping buffers, but also installation of fences or other type of screening features are commonly used as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. I would actually, oh gosh, I think, does anybody else have their hand up? I think that we need to be really thoughtful about what we allow into this particular part of Ward 6, because we have residences right next to commercial properties. Like I said, I've had a lot of constituents reach out to me, which is one of the reasons why I worked with the police department and the library to get a decibel reader as part of their tool library, so that people could take their own decibel readings and use it as evidence that there are noise violations. Mr. Sudbury, I know we emailed back and forth about this a little bit, and I'm wondering if you could explain to us how noise ordinances can be addressed, or violations of noise ordinances can be addressed, especially with this particular situation where a residential property is right next to a commercial property.
Yeah, our noise ordinance is difficult to enforce, generally speaking. And with respect to a use like an auto repair or tire shop, that's the proposed use, or other uses that would be allowed in this district if the proposed rezoning goes through, it would be difficult. It would be considered a commercial zone under the noise ordinance, which has its own noise limits, sound pressure limits in decibels. But it's adjacent to residential, and so there's like an overlay in where it's measured. So for the residential, on the residential side of the property, the residential sound levels would govern at the boundary or within 25 feet of the boundary. But there is a provision in the existing noise ordinance that allows exceedances in commercial districts for violations over the sound limit for 15 minutes cumulatively for every hour. And so something that has intermittent noise rather than consistent noise, it would be difficult to determine, like, do we need to add up each time a noise is made that's over the limit to add it up to be over 15 minutes in an hour? And that would be, I think, incredibly difficult from an enforcement perspective. And I think I mentioned this to you in our discussions, if concern is about sound coming from these, using the noise ordinance is a blunt instrument to address that concern. Really, it's zoning would be the better way to deal with it, to say this isn't the right zone for this piece of property because of the noise associated with it. Because we just have a difficult time with consistently measuring those noise limits. And then in addition, we would be citing, making criminal citation or issuing criminal citations. It would be against the business with employees. Like, is it the person making the noise? It's not the correct tool in my mind. I mean, if this passes and it's built and there are noise ordinance violations, our office and our prosecution office will work to do our best to enforce the ordinance. But it's just, it may not be the correct tool to use if that you're anticipating loud noise associated with proposed use in a piece of property.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sudbury. How are you doing? We asked a few questions there. Can I circle back in a second if you have additional questions? Thank you, Councillor Jordan. I see that Councillor Nugent, your hand is up. It shows one of three. I think you're the next councillor with a question. I think Mr. Graham might still have your hand up there.
I was going to say, is Mr. Graham the applicant?
Okay, great. Mr. Graham, did you want to answer any of Councillor Jordan's questions before we move on to the next councillor with questions?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just to be, very transparent and in talking with my clients since the Planning Commission, I think there's no real secret that the seller is looking to sell for the purpose of a Les Schwab Tire Center. So in terms of the noise, I think it's valid in those. I just want to make the point that 115 decibels is at the point of those impact wrenches sounding off. And just for everyone's awareness, like the attenuation of that noise at 100 feet. And this is just recent studies that were done at an actual operating Les Schwab Tire Centers with the bay doors open in the middle of the day as they're operating, attenuates down to that 70 decibel level, which is at the high end of like speech just below City Street kind of level there. So, and the plan for this site is with that landscape buffer actually being about those bay doors being about 140 feet away, which there would be some additional attenuation there in the sound. So hopefully that helps.
Okay. Thank you very much for that additional clarification. Thank you, Mr. Graham. Councillor Nugent?
Thanks. There might not be the right staff to answer this question, but the whole kind of tire shop, mechanic shop bordering residential makes me curious. And I know there's a Midas tire shop on Orange, the corner of Orange and Second, that is right up on residential and across the street for residential as well, closer than my understanding of what this is going to be. I'm curious if we've received any noise complaints or complaints in general about that. Yeah. It's been there as long as I can remember.
Yeah, me too. Mr. Sand, do you have any input on Councillor Nugent's question around other similar adjacent land uses, such as the Midas on Orange?
Just based on my experience staffing a zoning desk, which isn't necessarily where someone would complain about a noise ordinance, but it is where we often hear feedback to the city. And from my experience staffing zoning desk, I've not heard any concerns about those existing establishments, but that doesn't mean those might not be going to another department.
Yeah, that's fair. Thank you, Mr. Sand. Mr. Sudbury?
Yeah, just to add into that, as the head of the office that would be receiving those for investigation, since I've been with the city, I haven't heard of anything in the last 10 years with respect to noise ordinance violations at the Midas shop or frankly any of the tire auto repair facilities.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that additional input. And Councillor Kraski.
Thank you. I'm new, so I might be missing something, but I just want to clarify for myself, and I'm not quite sure exactly who this question is for, but if this was to be denied tonight, and what would happen, is this with this property being designated limited urban mixed use in the new land use plan and zoning code, does that, would this Les Schwaber, this use be allowed under that new designation?
All right, thank you for your question. Mr. Sand?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, that use would be allowed. So the proposed zoning district for this is limited urban mixed use. It has the same name as the place type, so it gets a little confusing. But with the limited urban mixed use zoning district, the proposed use in the zoning district would be an allowed use.
Any follow-up,
Thank you.
Councilor Krask?
That's good. Thank you.
Okay, you bet. All right, Councilor Jordan, follow-up questions?
Yeah, I think one of my questions would be for city staff. Do you think that perhaps some of the reasons why we don't have a record of noise ordinance violations is because our process is so difficult to implement? For example, I had neighbors living across the street from a doggy daycare center. They got decibel readings of 95 when this particular space opened its back door. And they took readings themselves, and this is by no means a call on the police, but the police just didn't have, it was so high priority that the police could never come in time to get an adequate decibel reading. And again, this is why I got a decibel reader in the public library, which I don't think a lot of people know about yet, but could a lack of complaints be the fact that it is too hard to get a noise violation heard and actioned?
Mr. Sudbury, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I think that's a fair criticism. I think in addition, even if we were to get a valid noise reading, the wheels of justice and something like this move relatively slow. So between filing a citation, having the case scheduled in municipal court, getting it through their busy docket, it could be several months for one citation to be processed, and even if they're found guilty at the end of it. So it's, again, the noise ordinance system is not maybe the best tool, and we are, in fact, recognizing this. One of the attorneys in my office, I've asked him to look at best practices for other cities around the country. Do they have noise ordinances that look like ours? And if not, are they doing something different that we should consider adopting? Because I agree with you, our system's not great. It's difficult to sometimes respond timely, as you've noted, and then burdens of proof is high on a criminal proceeding. So we have to make sure that the machine was accurately calibrated and do all those things you need to do to bring a criminal case in municipal court and something like this. So I think your criticism is fair, and it's possible that somebody maybe would complain years ago and then just gave it up because they didn't see any change on the ground.
Okay, thank you for that. Any follow-up questions?
I don't think so. Actually, no, I have one more for city staff. I apologize to the planner. I don't remember your name. John Sand. When you showed a picture of the property, it showed that there was a home in that picture that was zoned commercial, and I'm just curious about that. So you showed the property rezone that's in question, but then there was a chunk of that same block where there's actually a home, but it's shown as commercial, and I'm just curious about that. And I should have grabbed the slide number. It's just one of your graphics.
Is it the land use map you were?
It was a picture of the property with the land uses, the zoning types over the top. And it was blue, yes. And just was curious.
Yep, so it.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
These three parcels are currently zoned B3-2, and I believe it's the house on the corner that's being used for what was most recently a residence, and then this one was most recently used as an office. We do often see residential structures zoned as business with like B3, for example. Another example of that is along 3rd Street between Orange and Russell. Those are mostly single-family dwelling units with a B designation along there. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, it doesn't. Actually, if it could be possible to pull your slideshow back up and just go to maybe like slide 8, I think it maybe is what it was. Yeah, this one's good. So see how the southeast corner is blue, but it's outside of the proposed rezone? That's actually a home, and I'm curious why that is blue.
It looks, from my best guess from, was not here when this original zoning was implemented, but I'm guessing they were just following the parcel lines along here. And it roughly lines up with the north and south, and you'll see west of Reserve Street being zoned business at least a half a block back. So I'm guessing this was this whole part of this block between 8th and 9th got this zoning designation as B3. That align, considering future use of the Reserve Street corridor. And so I can also share with you that the 2045 Our Missoula land use plan that was adopted last December, almost a year ago, that limited urban mixed use place type goes all the way out to these parcels actually. So there's the place types don't always necessarily align directly correlate with the zoning. So in this case, you can see that from the land use plan that was adopted last year, the limited urban mixed use place type goes as far back as these parcels. So in theory, all these parcels that are in the limited urban mixed use could rezone to a zoning designation such as C2 that aligns with the growth policy land use plan. And I see Mary has her hand up.
I do too. Thank you. Mary, why don't you go right ahead and add to the response that Mr. Sand provided?
Yeah, this was formerly Special District Number 2, and so I think it was probably maybe 8 or 10 years ago, it was rezoned to B32. So all the properties that were in Special District 2 were rezoned to B32. And all of the B zones and commercial zones allow residential from single dwelling through multi-dwelling. So it's not uncommon to have property zone commercial that include a single dwelling residence.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you very much. All right.
I would like to move that we keep this in committee and hold it for further discussion about how we can address this ongoing problem of commercial areas abutting residential areas along Reserve Street, because it is a very common complaint I'm getting from my constituents, and I'm not quite sure how to handle it because they are being directly impacted by the businesses that are going in on Reserve Street, and it just seems like we're kind of leaving it without any options of a way forward.
Okay, so there's not a motion on the floor yet. Let me move this to Land Use and Planning Chair Nugent.
So I believe without objection, we can do that. If there's objection, it's just a simple majority vote to keep it or send it, as I recall. And I respectfully object to sending it back to committee.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to send it back to committee, which we would need to take a vote on. Is that correct? Is that correct? Is that correct, Mr.
That's
Sudbury?
the way I understand it, yeah.
Okay. All right, so there's a motion on the floor to send this item back to committee, and we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote on that now. Ms. Trimble, when you're ready.
Lights are flickering back here. Yeah, so we'll do a roll call vote on the motion by Councilor Jordan to return this item to committee, beginning with Becerra.
No.
Campbell.
No.
Krask.
No.
Farmer.
No.
Jones.
No.
Jordan,
Yes.
Melson,
No.
Nugent,
No.
Cheryl,
No.
Sika,
No.
and Anderson.
No.
And that item fails with 10 opposed, 1 in favor.
Okay. All right, thank you. So now we'll move to hear the main motion. So thank you, council members, for questions and staff and developer representative to answer those questions. We'll now hear the main motion and open up the public hearing.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Davis. I move council adopt an ordinance to rezone the subject property located at 1010, 1020, and 1030 Reserve Street and legally described as Lot 6 and Lot 7 of the Geesey Addition and Lot 1 of Davis Addition located in Section 29, Township 13 North, Range 19 West, PMM, from B3-2 Business Mixed Use / DE-C Design Excellence Overlay Corridor Typology 4 to C1-1 Community Commercial / DE-C Design Excellence Overlay Corridor Typology 4 based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law in the staff report.
Okay, thank you for that. We have the motion on the floor, so this opens up the public hearing and public comment. So anybody here wishing to make comment on this agenda item, come on up now.
Hello, everyone. My name's Tara Jensen. I live in the area. I live off 9th. I think you're the only one who's new. This came before the City Council about a year and a half ago. This is the same property, 3 sets of property. You all denied the C2 designation, I think almost unanimously. There's only 1 vote against, mostly because of traffic, safety concerns. Nothing's in the neighborhood has changed. There's still a dead end on 8th. There's still a dead end on 9th. There is still low-income housing at the end of 1. There are still no sidewalks. There are still no lights. Margaret and Clark are also not through streets, like nothing has changed for the area. You don't see as many neighbors here this time because everyone feels pretty defeated that we're back here with pretty much the same designation with the same issue. Although I will say we feel a little bit better. I think the Les Schwab is a little bit better than the car wash, so I guess a little bit better. So I will say that it seems like the writing's on the wall. If it doesn't happen tonight, it's going to happen with the sweeping policies, or at least that's how it was explained to us. So that doesn't feel great. So I think what I would ask, and I think what the neighbors want, is something proactive from the city on how this gets actually developed. Something that involves the neighbors. We know that turning off of 9th is incredibly dangerous right now, whether you're doing the left turn or the right turn. I know that there is a pothole that takes up so much water, and it is an ice trap. I know I have to take a big turn. Otherwise, you're going to go into, we know that, but people going in and out of a tire shop aren't going to know that. I don't even know what it's like to turn off 8th, but I've heard a ton of things that it's, because you're coming right off that hill, coming kind of from Benson's up. It's incredibly dangerous. I can't imagine people who don't know that neighborhood going in and out of that. I don't know how the traffic is going to work. I tried to figure it out in my mind, how that is done safely. I have no idea how that will work. So I hope that there is some sort of proactive nature from the city talking to us that live there on how we can make this as safe as possible, and also impact us as little as possible, understanding that the writing seems to kind of be on the walls. So I guess that would be my also parking. I don't know how a Les Schwab is going to work. There's no parking on those streets. I don't know how, and we've all seen them around town, like people park on the streets where the cars are being worked on. I don't know where they go, because if they're parked on the street, that makes that turn even harder. If you hit that ice patch, and if there is an accident, that's going to back up Reserve Street for half a mile more. So that's my ask of you, is to be proactive in involving us in how this gets developed, if you can't deny it.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen, for your comments. I also would encourage you to get on the City of Missoula's Forum Center, and it's How Do I? And you can report a pothole. And actually, I would do it, but you know the specifics, and actually it's better for residents to do that. And if it's a large pothole, please report that. We have an unbelievably responsive streets department that fills potholes very quickly. We want to get after it quickly because then we can keep the integrity of the road. So please, I would appreciate if you could take some time and report that pothole. That'd be great. Thank you. Any other public comment on this agenda item?
Hi, I'm Suzette Dusso, a Missoulian for quite a long time, and I've seen this beautiful valley grow and develop. And this may not be pertinent comment to what is actually before you at the table, but I have looked at our beautiful valley and recognize that, and I'm sure you have too, that we have limited floor space for which to use to service our community, to build a community. And I'm just questioning the need for another commercial site, another footprint devoted to commercial, when I believe that we have probably utilized a disproportionate share of this beautiful valley floor for commercial as opposed to housing. So I think when something like this comes up, there's an opportunity to really decide, are we going to impact neighborhoods with a commercial development? We need to really recognize what is it actually we're moving towards. So of course, this developer has purchased the property. We cannot dictate to someone what they do with their property, but we can also start to guide the community in a way that is going to provide housing. I don't know anybody who thinks that we need more commercial in Missoula. What is our greatest critical need? It's housing. It's affordable housing. It's housing for our teachers and our firefighters. So I don't know at what point in the process you can start to recognize that you're impacting neighborhoods like this when decisions like this are made. So I may be out of turn in speaking out against this project, but I would be against this project if it were mine. And if I were in your shoes, I would work for something else, something better that really meets the needs of our community. And when we talk about creating buffer zones or mitigate impacts of a commercial entity, well, again, you're building on to reserve streets. So if we can mitigate the commercial impacts of a business, then we can certainly build housing up to reserve street and mitigate those impacts as well. So forgive me if I'm out of turn, but I think that we need to really recognize the significant need for housing in Missoula and start addressing it in whatever way we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dussault. Come on up.
Well, I'm Bruce Baxter. Just very quickly, I would like to have my complete written comments entered into the record of the meeting tonight. Is there a way I can do that?
Yes, absolutely. There's an officer at the beginning there. Please make sure that you provide it to the officer, and he'll make sure that we submit those on part of the record for the agenda item for Aspire subdivision.
Okay, that's all I need.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Baxter. Okay, anybody else wishing to make public comment on this agenda item? Not seeing any in the room. How about online? And I'm not seeing any online either. Okay, that does wrap up our public comment and our public hearing then for this agenda item. So we're going to bring it back to City Council discussion. And I see Councilor Jordan, your hand's up.
Thank you. I think we've heard from a lot of our constituents tonight that they're not feeling like they're being heard. I think that our constituents do a lot of hard work for us in that they are the ones on the grounds talking to their neighbors and observing wildlife and walking the streets that are soon to be developed and driving the roads that are getting increased density. And they're coming to us and they're telling us what they need and they're not feeling heard. And I want to acknowledge that I've noticed that. I just want to say I've noticed that. And I'm not quite sure what to do about it. But I think that building for the sake of building isn't necessarily the right way to approach how to address Missoula's needs. This rezone is going to directly impact neighbors and their quality of life, and it isn't because that they haven't complained, it's that they have complained and it goes nowhere. And that's why I'm pushing so hard tonight as their city council representative, because I get calls from people 1 block back from Reserve regularly about noise induced by new commercial areas. And I don't know how to rectify this. This is clearly a rezone that is going to cause harm, that is going to make quality of life for people in Ward 6 harder. It's a ward that has no infrastructure. Well, it has infrastructure, but the infrastructure is not meeting the needs of the infill. People regularly walking in the streets. I myself have put in requests for traffic studies and traffic calming circles, and am told that it doesn't meet the plan, yet I'm getting all this feedback from my constituents that this is what they want. And I don't know how to rectify what our neighbors are asking us to do versus what our zoning plan says. I know that we talked a little bit the other day about our new code and how it's going to not be perfect for every corner of Missoula, and that some of those things are percolating right now. And this is another area where our zoning doesn't meet the needs of our neighbors. And I don't really understand why we're not listening. I do hope that my constituents feel like they've been represented tonight, at least by one city councilor, and that the folks in Aspire feel like they've been represented by somebody on city council, even if it was outside of our purview. But I just think we're doing a horrible job of listening to what people want.
Okay, Councillor Campbell, it looks like your hand is next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be in support of this zone change, although I've spoken with a couple of my colleagues about this before, about the fact that this is coming before us now. We got the land use plan or the zoning framework and Uniform Development Code coming just next month that would implement the kind of zoning that they would want for this anyhow. So I just found it curious that this application was coming at this point in time. But just sitting here, it kind of occurred to me, I guess, theoretically, the adverse could be true too. I mean, we could approve the zoning and then through deliberation and whatnot, when we go through the development code next month, perhaps we decide as a body, no, we're going to go ahead and turn it into residential. I mean, there's always that possibility, I guess. But for the here and now, I'll be a yes vote.
Thank you, Councillor Becerra.
Is it too late to ask a question?
No, not at all.
Staff. John, could you talk a little bit about access from Reserve and in the conversations with MDT? Are there any more allowed accesses off of Reserve, or does that happen at the building permit approval time?
So there's let me pull up my email.
I might have
from
missed it when you brought it up, but
oh, no problem at all. So building permit is when we see the traffic impact study done, and then in regards to the Reserve Street safety plan, which is separate from any development proposal. That's something the city is working on closely with MDT. So as part of the safety plan, Reserve Street, they've identified this southern section of Reserve Street for a few key improvements, which include bike and pedestrian shared use path, potentially implementation of a protected bike facility, And then the one that's most relatable to this would be access management, which would involve turn movement control through the addition of medians in location of U-turn slip lanes. The intention of this is to reduce turning movement conflicts that occur from accessing business and parking lots. This access management, when implemented, will align with higher intensity land uses. Let's see. In this community commercial as access in and out operational should operate and reduce conflict matter. So that's part of the comments in regards to the Reserve Street Safety Action Plan for traffic impact studies. I do not know exactly what the outcome or recommendations would be from that. I'm not sure if Zach online has any thoughts on that, but often we see, installation of the traffic calming circles. So I'll turn it over to Zach if he has any additional information on the traffic impact study.
I don't have a lot of additional information at this time. Until the study's done, we won't know the outcome. And with that overlapping that overall corridor study with Reserve, there's a lot more going on than just the local. So I say that because there may be initial measures as part of this development that go in to address traffic, but there might be larger scale traffic measures going in on Reserve as that larger study's completed. But some of the things that were discussed have already been discussed previously would be restricting movements on and off of 8th and 9th. And but I can't really, until that study's done, go much further than that.
Okay, and that study will be required at the time of building permit approval, correct?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I would just, I would add here, Zach or John, that in addition to the traffic calming, or excuse me, the traffic impact study, at the time of building permit, there would also be a review of any required right-of-way improvements. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe, yeah, that's correct. As I'm not a member of Public Works, to which those right-of-way improvements will be, I cannot speak to. But from my experience, I anticipate any like sidewalks adjacent to the property would be required for installation meeting current accessibility code. Kind of the complete street picture there. Curb, gutter, sidewalk, driveway approaches.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. Any additional council comment or questions? Okay, not seeing any, then we will go ahead and go to a roll call vote, please, Ms. Trimble.
All right, voting on the main motion, item 6.3, a motion to adopt an ordinance to rezone the subject property located at 1010, 1020, and 1030 Reserve Street, beginning with Campbell.
Yes.
Trask.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Jordan.
No.
Nelson.
Yes.
Nugent.
Yes.
Cheryl.
Yes.
Sika.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
And Becerra.
Yes.
And that item passes with 10 in favor, 1 opposed.
Okay, Thank you all very much. Thank you, members of the public coming down to provide comment. Thank you to the staff and developer representative for answering questions. That does wrap up our public hearings for the evening. We do have an item of new business. This item of new business is setting a special meeting of City Council. And Claire Trimble, this item is yours for the staff report, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to it. We have been planning. We've heard a lot about the Unified Development Code in our various conversations this evening that is coming down the pike in December. And we are going to have many meetings and opportunities for public engagement on that between now and December 22nd. But council has asked for an additional meeting to be set at the end of the month in order to hopefully finalize that adoption. It will be before planning board a few times between now and then. We will be setting a public hearing on December 15th, but this would be a special meeting, and one of the it was not originally set on our public calendar for the year, which is why we need to have a special setting. And special meetings of City Council are limited under state law to one topic. So this will be a one item meeting. We will only be focused on the Unified Development Code at that point in time.
Okay, thank you very much for that information. And any questions from council on that? Councilor Anderson, do you have a question?
Thanks. Madam Mayor, I was like trying to raise my hand. So does that mean that we will be providing the same approval of minutes, public comment on non-agenda items, all of the things on the council that we would normally do on that Monday night? I was just curious by the whole definition of one topic, as Ms. Trimble pointed out.
Thank you for that question. Ms. Trimble?
It would be a pared down version of the agenda. So we would not have things like committee reports and things of that nature. We would just have the item that the meeting was being called for, which is the adoption of 22. But we are also required under state law to have a section for public comment for items not on the agenda at every public meeting. So that is always included.
Great, thanks so much.
All right, absolutely. You bet.
That's okay. I'll remember that's
Okay, sounds good. I'll come back to you when we get to that point. We'll hear the motion on the floor, so I'll go to President Cheryl for that.
Thanks. I recommend that we set a special meeting of City Council for December 22nd, 2025, following the public hearing set for December 15th, 2025 to adopt Title 22 Unified Development Code.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment on this agenda item?
Hi, I'm Suzette Dusso again, and I received notice of the zoning change that it was coming about a month ago. And of course, this was at the same time that many other things were happening that needed our attention in the city. And so I don't think the community is fully aware of what is part of this zoning update. I was at a theater event Saturday night, and someone said, "Did you realize that there will be density proposals for the Lower Rattlesnake, and that multi-storied buildings would be allowed?" Is that correct, or do I have this wrong?
Sorry, it's not a Q&A tonight, but you can leave your comment and then council comment can follow up later.
So my comment is that please give the community a little bit more response time. The time between Thanksgiving and Christmas is a very, very busy time for many people. I am surprised that we're proposing such a huge change to be voted on December 22nd. Is that correct? This will be adopted on December 22nd, right? It'll be voted on. It'll be approved or denied on December 22nd. Is that correct? I would suggest please then give us a few more weeks move it into January. I'm not sure what state law may limit you to, or what other laws might prevent you from moving it into a time that is much less difficult for families to be here and to speak up and to become aware of what is actually being proposed. Because I think I may be unkind in this, but I kind of have a feeling that once the zoning is issued, as we're seeing tonight, the public has very little recourse in discussing an event or discussing a project. Once a developer or once a person has their property, it's very, very difficult to for the community to respond. So I would just suggest that maybe you move this into January, where more people will have more time to look at the implications of this zoning change. That's really going to define who we are as a community for many, many years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dussault. Any other public comment on this agenda item?
My name's Katie Thompson. So yeah, I have what came in the mail. It seems very short notice. I got online, plugged in some addresses of properties we have, trying to get a grasp. It's very hard to grasp when it's color coded and it's light orange versus dark orange. And I think the general public is probably scrambling to try to grasp all the changes that are being proposed. And I really appreciate Miss Jordan. I feel like crying because I feel like one council member has heard the public tonight, and it is devastating. I know you're doing your best to try to implement growth, but it's kind of pointless if this isn't the community that people are showing up to try to have you here, and you're not caring what the impacts are on everybody. So this is very little notice for us to figure out what this means and how it will impact us. I would have thought there would have been more, and maybe I'm behind the 8 ball. I think there's enough going on in the universe that you are not giving people enough time to figure out what's even going on to show up. So yes, I would ask for more time as well. I'm carrying this with me. I got online. It's just nearly impossible to be dealing with the floodplain, rezoning. The list is endless on what's going on here. So please hear your constituents. It is absolutely devastating to be a citizen right now. I would love also when you answer and vote for, a rezoning, that you give it a reason for that. I would love that you have to give a reason on why you think.
Let's stay focused on the topic at hand, which is December 22nd.
I gotcha. Okay. I would ask that be extended as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Any other public comment on this agenda item?
Hi, my name is Mary Giuliani. Yes, I would really just like to reiterate what's already been said. I know that the zoning has been in the works for many years. However, the actual plans that we've been able to see came out pretty recently. And having a vote on this on December 22nd, 3 days before Christmas, just seems very confusing, honestly, in a time when you know that many people won't be able to attend. They're busy with other things going on. So yeah, I guess I'm confused about why it has been laid out this way. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Giuliani. Any other public comment on this agenda item? Okay, not seeing any in the room. How about online? Not seeing any online. That wraps up our public comment for this agenda item, and we bring it back to council deliberation. So, Councillor Campbell?
Thank you, Mayor. I was just wondering if there was going to be more discussion, perhaps during committee or some ground rules as far as if one of us decides to bring an amendment forward, be it with the map or the development code itself or some item, is there going to be much like the budget process, where there's going to be a deadline set for us to present? Yeah.
Councilor Nugent.
Yeah, I was going to talk about it a little bit in land use and planning on Wednesday and then send an email out to council, but we're looking at a schedule of requesting amendments from council to be submitted by noon on the Tuesday after the public hearing. Of course, if you've got them ahead of that, the sooner staff can get them and look at them and give feedback and potentially work them in, that might be a better chance for success. But the public hearing will open on the 15th, and then it'll be referred back to land use and planning, where we'll have a working session for a good chunk of the day to kind of work through amendments. Then it'll come back to council on the 22nd. So that is the general time frame, but we'll send out an email that kind of outlines that a little bit more.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your question. Councilor Jones.
Just a quick comment. I just wanted to provide a little context to this whole project. It's been 3 years in the making. ARPA dollars went into this because we strategized that one of the best ways to improve housing, one of the best actions the city could take was to really address our code, to address our zoning. So this is really a huge action the city is trying to take to address housing, which is our biggest need. It has been 3 years in the works. There were months and months of work that went into the land use map that was approved last year, and now the zoning is based on that land use map. There was one person who was specifically designated as a communications outreach person for this project and has spent 3 years of her life doing that, and has visited with numerous neighborhood councils as well as other staff, community forum, gone to many organizations around town. There have been a lot of, I'm losing the word, but meetings, open houses, I guess that's what I'd call them, where there's been a lot of information provided. So I totally understand not everybody necessarily has it in front of them, but a huge amount of work has been done on outreach on this. So it may seem like it's short, but honestly, from a city council perspective, we were hoping this would be done last spring. And we were discussing that 2 years ago in terms of a timeline, but it has taken longer to try and really work with everybody, get lots and lots of input. And I think at this point, if it goes past December, it's going to go into the next year. It can get delayed. And we've literally got builders who are on pause, waiting for this to go through to start getting permits through to do more building. So for folks who need homes, for folks who are trying to buy, I just wanted to provide more context. It's not just let's do this because it's fun. It is not fun. In fact, it's a ton of work and it's a big, big, heavy lift. But if people need more information, please reach out to your city councilor. We'll get more to you, but I just wanted to provide more context.
Thank you, Councilor Jones, and a really wonderful amount of information and schedule for all public engagement that's currently active now, of course, is on Engage Missoula Code Reform, and it's an exceptional amount of information. And Planning Board is currently hearing the adoption draft now, so this process is open and live. And I will also, just since we're talking about December 22nd, say that is not the first public hearing. The first public hearing is December 15th. So I just want to make sure that folks realize that for the Unified Development Code, and again, this has all been publicly noticed, that the first hearing for the Unified Development Code is December 15th. All right, Councilor Anderson.
Thanks so much, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Councilwoman Jones, for providing that context. I think it's the way I have been thinking about it is the final culmination of a 3-year project is being voted on. And the reason why it's December 22nd is because we wanted to give even more time for meetings, staff input, and things like that. So, I know we had hoped to have it scheduled and be done with. And so I had booked a plane ticket to not be here on the 22nd because we're not supposed to be here, but I will be zooming in from my vacation because it is so important. But it is, I mean, I remember we not only have somebody whose sole job at the city is this, but we contracted with Common Good Missoula to do community outreach over the last 3 years. And the first kickoff to it was an event with 200-300 people or more at the fairgrounds when Mayor Hess was there and talking about it. So, and they've been at the library and they spoke to every Rotary, every club you can think of, the farmers market and whatnot. So, appreciate that the notice for the final vote is going out, but it's definitely, I mean, it's something that we've all been working on for quite some time. And to Ms. Jones's point, you know, it is the reason why we heard the zoning today was because developers are sort of like, how much longer do we have to wait? I'm not going to wait anymore. I'm going to get my application in for various things. And that's exactly what we're trying to avoid because it clogs up what staff is working on and what we're trying to work on this, which is to streamline and to get more housing because that is our number one concern. So, appreciate all the work that staff has been going into it, but yes, happy to interface with any council or any constituents who would like more information, but I'm trying to just take and turn it a little bit and being like, it is the final vote in a very long process that is all kind of coming to fruition, and look forward to more discussions on it over the course of the next month. Thanks.
Me too. Thank you, Councillor Anderson. And Councillor Nugent.
Thanks, Mayor Davis. The comments for the last 3 years have been, it's the most far-reaching public outreach process that I've seen since I've been on council, especially the process giving us the land use plan, which kind of guides zoning, as we all know. Just today, staff released an adoption draft on Engage Missoula, which takes into account probably thousands of pages of public comment from emails and feedback from these public events. So there are parts of the public that are actively engaging. I think that there's always going to be a segment that's concerned that there's never enough time. So I respect that concern entirely. And council has said that we acknowledge that this is going to be a living document, so we're going to need to expect to make updates on the regular as we see it out. But the mayor and I spoke at an event over a month ago after the first draft of this came out at the fairgrounds. And then there was the open house at the library that I attended the week before. And most of the feedback in this phase is coming from kind of technical users. The broader kind of community feedback, they don't necessarily get into the nitty-gritty of each part of it. But I think something that's maybe important, and I think we need to do a better job of communicating this over the next month, because we're still a month away from final approval of this, but is some of the density requirements that people are concerned about are coming from the state legislature, and we don't even have a choice. Now, height in the rattlesnake is not coming from the state legislature. However, duplex by right anywhere is straight from the state legislature. ADU by right, straight from the state legislature. Removing a lot of the parking mandates, straight from the state legislature. So some of the things that people are really concerned about, we don't even have the ability to not adopt. And so I think that we need to get a little bit better job of communicating that. But I would encourage people to go to engagemissoula.com and find the Our Missoula project and certainly weigh in. And I do appreciate that the postcard, while you would have liked it sooner, I do appreciate that when you went to the website, you were able to pull up maps and that there's information out there, because I think our staff and our GIS department's done a great job of letting people look at on a map what their zoning looks like now versus toggling over and saying what'll it look like under this new adoption, and there are definitely things that might not work for some people. I also would point out that many of our partners, I don't want to say all, only because I don't want to speak for everyone, but many of our partners in the subsidized and permanently affordable housing sector have been at the table the whole time and are very eager for these adoptions to come forward. I always want to call them NMCDC, but the front steps. Our friends in the community land trust world are very excited about this and see some of the positives. I know the Giuliani sisters who talk about land trusts all the time decided to leave during my comments, but I think that it's important to note that we are making sure that those partners are at the table and being part of this. So,
absolutely. All right. All right, thank you. It looks like that is the final council comment on this agenda item, which means that we can now go to a roll call vote to, just double checking here where we are for the main motion. Yes. All right. We can take a roll call vote on this item, please.
All right. Voting this evening on item 7.1 to set a special meeting of City Council for December 22nd, beginning with Krask.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Jordan.
Yes.
Nelson.
No.
Nugent.
yes.
Cheryl.
Yes.
Vasika.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Sarah.
Yes.
And Campbell.
Yes.
That item passes with 10 in favor, 1 opposed.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, again, for your comments and for the dialogue. Appreciate that. We'll now move on to the consent agenda. This is item number 9 on the agenda. And so we'll go ahead and take a look. Consent agenda, items on the consent agenda were approved in city council committees to be placed on the consent agenda to save time at council meetings by voting on them as a package. The city clerk will read the list aloud so citizens watching on MCAT will know what is on the consent agenda. We'll invite community comment on these items before the council votes.
All right. On this evening's consent agenda, our first motion is to approve accounts payable or claims for checks dated November 18th, 2025 in the amount of $3,285,158.67. We have a motion to set a public hearing for December 1st, 2025 to consider the resolutions for the first quarter fiscal year 2026 amendments to the annual appropriations. We have a motion to adopt the resolution relating to up to $1,033,000 water system revenue bond, a DNRC drinking water state revolving loan program, or SRF bonds, series 2025G, authorizing the issuance and fixing the terms and conditions thereof. We have a motion to adopt a resolution updating specific open space bond sources for both the Indreland, Laval Creek, and Hayden Grass Valley Conservation Easement open space projects with no net change in approved dollar amounts for each project. We have a motion to accept the Gleneagle Conservation Easement and Trail Easement, which are being fully donated by SEV Enterprises, LLC, and authorize the mayor to sign the final related documents contingent on the acceptance of the baseline document and final negotiated terms and conditions. And finally, we have a motion to approve and authorize the mayor to sign a construction contract with MET Automation and Controls in the amount of $321,850 for SCADA improvements and panel modifications.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any public comment on the consent agenda?
So I actually came for the parking and I stayed for the zoning. So I'm here because I am very much opposed to the Parking Commission extending.
Ms.
its-
Dussault, we're almost to that agenda, but we're not there yet.
Oh,
So this is on the
sorry.
consent agenda only, just the
So-
items that were just read. Parking Commission's next. So if you have
Oh,
if you have a
sorry
comment for the
about
Parking Commission, I'll ask you to hold. We'll come back to that. We're almost there. All right, any public comment on the consent agenda? The items that were just read on the screen? I'm not seeing any in the audience. Not seeing any hands raised online. Do any council members wish to separate any of the items? Not seeing any hands raised or online. We'll go ahead and do a voice vote on the consent agenda, please.
All right, voting on this evening's consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
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 And any opposed? That passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now move on to regular business. This is item number 10 on the agenda. Items listed under committee reports were not approved unanimously in city council committees. The chairperson of the standing city council committee will make a motion. We invite community comment on each item. The one item we have under regular business is 10.1.G. This is the Public Works and Mobility Committee report. This is specifically GB, 10.1 GB, the resolution expanding the Missoula Parking Commission jurisdiction into the hip strip. We do not have additional information, but we do have a staff member here to provide any clarification this evening from the Missoula Parking Commission, Jody Pilgrim, the director of that commission. So I will turn it over to Councilor Becerra for the motion, please.
Thank you. I move that we approve a resolution extending jurisdictional boundaries for the Missoula Parking Commission to include the hip strip as shown in Exhibit B.
Okay, thank you very much. Motion's been made, so now it's an opportunity to make public comment. Come on up. Sure, you bet.
Okay, so I am here to adamantly oppose the extension of the Parking Commission to south of the river to what we call the hip strip area. Full disclosure, it's my neighborhood. I'm a NIMBY, but I wouldn't want this whether I lived in the Rattlesnake or up on South Hills or whatever. We have a very viable, very healthy, small business area called the Hip Strip. It's very successful. It was designed 120 years ago by A.J. Gibson and Judge Knowles, designed to provide services for the neighborhood and for the city of Missoula, and it has served us well for 120 years. Basically, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I have a very hard time believing that people love the Parking Commission in Missoula. I know people who will not shop downtown because of the perceived difficulty in parking, although that's not necessarily true. And I shop downtown all the time. But there is a perception, and I know it has hurt small businesses. I was one of those small storefront businesses downtown Missoula for 10 years. We had the same problem 10 years ago, or not 10 years ago. We had the same problem then. We have the same problem now, which is a small percentage of the population chooses to sit in front of businesses all day and feed the meters. It has been a continuing problem since my business was where Fact and Fiction is now. So my suggestion is abandon the whole notion, but certainly don't expand it. But I know I've shopped Kalispell, I've shopped Helena, I've shopped Bozeman, I've shopped Coeur d'Alene. They all have free parking for 2 hours on street, and then they ticket and they fine heavily those who choose to violate that public trust. And so I did a very non-scientific survey. I put it on Facebook. 90% of my respondents on Facebook, which is not a very scientific survey, were adamantly opposed. In very strong terms. I spoke with many of the business owners, my friends that I shop with all the time, today and got the same response. 90% are saying why. So I'm asking you why.
Thank you, Ms. Dussault.
Thanks.
Thanks for your comment. Any other public comment on this agenda item? Not seeing any in the room here. Any public comment online? Not seeing any public comment online. All right, so we will bring it back to council discussion for this agenda item. And are there any council questions or comments? Either one, questions or comments? And again, I'll mention that Ms. Pilgrim's in the audience if anybody has any questions. Great, Councilor Jones.
Jody, if you could come up. I will ask you a couple questions. We actually discussed this extensively last Wednesday, so I'm not going to go over it all again, nor in my comments. But just if you could touch on the why, which we've spent a lot of time on that, but also you've also talked a lot about the fact that you have a lot of different tools that you can use for what specifically will work on the hip strip. So it's not just necessarily a cut and paste from the downtown to the hip strip with tools, but those are kind of the two topics, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, of course. Thank you so much. So the why for our expansion into the hip strip, like you mentioned, we covered a lot of it on Wednesday at committee. So I'll try and just briefly go over the main points. One is that this area is contiguous with our existing jurisdiction. So we serve the Central Business District and the residential area around the University of Montana. Our officers drive through the hip strip every day to get between our two jurisdictional boundaries. So that contiguity was one of the first things that we looked at when considering expanding into the hip strip. The second thing that we looked at was utilization, and the utilization in that area. What we're seeing is that vehicles are parking in front of the businesses there and not moving all day. And those vehicles are coming from a variety of sources. Some of those vehicles are students or faculty that attend Hellgate High School, and some of those vehicles are actually employees of the downtown or the Central Business District that park over in the hip strip where they don't have to pay for parking and then walk over the beautiful Bear Tracks Bridge and store their vehicles downtown all day. So that utilization is the second main factor that we considered when looking at expanding into the hip strip. Additionally, we looked at future plans for the area, developments or redevelopment projects that might lead to an increase in vehicular traffic into the area and that demand for the on-street parking resources. And we see that development that is planned over on 4th and Myrtle that will increase the number of cars that are expected in the area on a regular basis. And we also see the new Missoulian development that was just recently announced, both being prime examples of things that are going to bring a lot more cars into that area and potentially require management. Trying to go over my mental list. I'm going to stop there with reasons for the why, but I can say that during our public engagement, we did talk with a lot of those hip strip business owners about what they wanted to see, and what they wanted to see is a turnover in front of their businesses, which doesn't necessarily mean metered parking. Metered parking is one way to encourage turnover in front of businesses, but what we saw on the hip strip was on Higgins specifically, on 3rd Street right over the bridge, and then on a little section of 6th Street, there are a bunch of 2-hour time limited parking signs that are not enforced because it's not in our jurisdiction. We can't enforce them, and no one else is enforcing them. So when we do move over into the hip strip, our plan is to start with enforcing those 2-hour time limited parking right in front of the businesses, which we're hoping will cause that turnover of vehicles because people will know that they They can't just store their cars in front of the businesses all day, every day. And so there will be more opportunities for cars to come and park and visit those businesses and then leave within that 2-hour time period. And then finally, the other piece that we're considering with the hip strip is not just those businesses that are on Higgins and 3rd Street, but also the residential areas surrounding those businesses that also are highly impacted by people parking on and using those on-street resources for the entire day. So we've talked to a lot of the neighbors who have expressed an interest in more of a residential parking permit program, particularly around the high school part of that area. Did that answer all of it?
Yeah, thanks. There's a lot more information from last week's committee meeting, just FYI, but I just wanted to kind of hit the high points, and I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thanks.
This might be in a follow-up question from some of the other counselors, but you did mention at the very beginning the why that the commercial business district and the university are already jurisdictions of the Missoula Parking Commission. What I find from a lot of constituents is they don't realize that without the hip strip being adopted into the Missoula Parking Commission's jurisdiction, you cannot enforce the 2-hour parking. Would you please elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think that's something that isn't commonly understood based on the comments that I have seen from a lot of folks.
Right, yes. So the Parking Commission has a set and defined boundary. And per the state law that allows for a commission to be set up, our boundary cannot be the city limits. We have to have a finite boundary within the city. And so when we were first established, it was just as the central business district, which is what we know of as downtown primarily. And in 1970, we expanded our jurisdiction to include the residential area around the University of Montana, based on requests from the residents at that time to help with the impacts of the students parking from the University of Montana. So really right now we're limited in our ability to support any parking programs or any business needs or resident needs in areas outside of those jurisdictions.
Thank you for that, Jody. I appreciate that. We do have some additional council questions, so you might as well just stay up here. They're probably aimed at you. Councillor Campbell?
Actually, I just have comment if we're going to have a separate time period for that, or?
We will. You certainly will. We're in questions now, but we'll definitely come back to comments. You bet. So, Councillor Becerra.
Thank you. Jody, could you just touch briefly, and again, there's a lot more information on the presentation. There are links attached to the presentation with an optimization study that further describes needs that we have in the community for management in this area. But could you touch on the how diverse the comments that you have received have been, who you've talked to, and who you are planning to continue to engage with, so that this can move forward with as much engagement as possible?
Sure, yeah. So we started studying the hip strip area in 2023 as part of our parking, our comprehensive parking plan that was intended to set our plan for the next 5 years, for both management, but also for any growth or expansion. And we, in March of 2024, had a general kickoff of that project. And at that time, we had 3 in-person engagement events at the University of Montana, and 1 in the hip strip, and then 1 downtown. And also did like an initial count of the spaces over there, did an inventory and some occupancy studies. From there, we formed an advisory committee and a technical advisory committee that had members of the public from the businesses over in the hip strip, businesses downtown, Mountain Line, Missoula in Motion, the Downtown Association, the university, the director of parking for the University of Montana,
I'm not going to be able to remember them all right now, but those committees were used throughout that planning process to advise on what they saw as the need for parking management moving forward. And that plan was provided to us in early 2024. I'm getting the timeline wrong. Our kickoff was in March of 23. Then our plan was provided to us at the end of that year in January of 2024. And then we took it back out to the community, and we attended neighborhood council meetings for the Riverfront neighborhood, for the Heart of Missoula neighborhood, and for the University neighborhood, and got feedback about how basically our management strategies in that plan. Our board adopted the plan of June of 2024, and we took the time between June and October to establish our metrics for determining if expansion was necessary, and also to set up how we could collect data and track that utilization. So we created a map that could be shared with the public, where they could see the utilization data that we were collecting on a regular basis. And also, we wanted to use that mapping tool so that the public could leave narrative comments about what they saw as the needs were, what the needs were for the hip strip. And so between October 24 and March of 25, we just gathered data. And we brought it back to council and talked about it here. We brought it back to our board and showed them that we had determined that there was a need for some sort of management in the hip strip area. And after that, we had 3 more in-person engagement events to share the data that we had collected on our mapping tool. And then our board approved this resolution to move forward in September. So that's why we're bringing it back to you all now.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
All right. And Councilor Jordan.
Thank you. This may be too big of a question for tonight, but after you spoke last week about how the Missoula Senior Center could approach enforcement of its parking lot, you mentioned that they might need to pay. And I'm wondering if you can explain how that might look for them, or is this just kind of too big of a question to ask at 10 o'clock on Monday night?
We're all here together.
Thank
10
you.
o'clock on Monday night.
That's it.
And I'll talk about parking till midnight if you let me. So, but I'll try not to. So it's not too big of a question, but it's not a fair question for just me, because it's something that would need to be worked out with the senior center or any private lot owners within the hip strip area or any of our existing jurisdictions. So we do have several private lots that we have agreements to manage parking in, and we do that in lots of different ways depending upon the need of the lot owner. And so we have 2 ways that we manage parking lots privately now. We either manage it completely and we sell permits or charge for parking in those lots, and we collect the revenue for those things and enforce it on behalf of the private lot owner. We also have situations where the owner is responsible for selling those lease spaces, so they get the revenue from selling those lease spaces, and they set up the signage, they establish the rules, and then we enforce those rules on their behalf. We get the ticket revenue from that, and usually they pay a small fee because we don't make money on enforcement, and it's not our goal to make money on enforcement. The goal of enforcement is to encourage compliance with the rules, and so it's not a money maker for us. But in order to provide those support services, they do have to be offset with some sort of revenue generation. Does that mostly answer it?
It's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. Ms. Pilgrim, I don't see any other hands raised. We'll just make an all call one. Any other questions or comments on this agenda item? Okay. I'm not seeing any then. So that does, oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. Counselor Campbell, I don't know what's going on tonight. I have to restart the system.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Appreciate all the work that's been done by the Parking Commission office, but I am not going to be in support of this time. I think, going back to comments I made during committee last week, I think first and foremost, I've always said, coming on to council, one of the things that I keep in mind, particularly the business community, is do no harm to the business community. And I think this does do harm to the business community, particularly downtown. We see that downtown. I think it detracts from business. I think people are disincentivized from conducting business downtown under that arrangement. I think this would exacerbate that problem, coupled with the fact that, we have a sand project that's developing on Hayden Street that's going to further exacerbate the problem on the south side of the river with the loss of parking spaces between 6th and, the Bear Tracks Bridge. The other part of it too is, I'd hope there'd be more accommodation for residential parking at the very least for those folks that live down there, in difference to student parking, because I know that's an ongoing issue with residents being able to park the property that own park, look for parking at various times of day, to handle that. And then, the other part of it too is, I understand at this present time, there's no plans for metered parking. It does concern me somewhat that authority does not come back to this body to make that determination for metered parking in that expanded jurisdiction, or really anywhere else in the city for that matter. So that's always been a concern of mine. And yeah, so, for those reasons, I will not be in support.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Councillor Campbell. Anybody else for comments before we vote? Okay, not seeing any. Then we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. Ms. Ripple, when you're ready.
All right, voting on item 10.1.G.B to approve a resolution extending the jurisdictional boundaries of the Missoula Parking Commission to include the hip strip, beginning with Jones.
Yes.
Jordan.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Nugent.
Yes.
Cheryl.
Yes.
Wasika.
No.
Anderson.
Yes.
Becerra.
Yes.
Campbell.
No.
Press.
Yes.
And Farmer.
Yes.
That item passes with 9 in favor, 2 opposed.
Okay, thank you all very much. And again, thank you to members of the public for coming down. Appreciate Ms. Pilgrim, you sticking around for a really lengthy council meeting and being able to be here. And, one thing I'll say is, and I'm sure council members and the public did have a chance to see the number of public comments that were consolidated into a summary form for this agenda item. And, I think there's probably nothing more contrasting than parking. It's one of those issues in our community, and there's a lot of competing interests. But what I could see from those comments were that we have a lot of business owners overwhelmingly want turnover. And so we have to have some way and some mechanism to actually manage that. So extending the jurisdiction allows us to do that. And residents want relief from commuter parking, which ultimately means that we have to manage that. So I appreciate the discussion this evening. And one thing I think that was very clear in all the comments that you saw is that commenters are urging caution and being careful of unintended consequences. And I feel very confident in the leadership of Jody Pilgrim at the Missoula Parking Commission. And so I think that City Council should look forward to additional updates and engagement with the Missoula Parking Commission as we embark in this new jurisdiction, this new managed jurisdiction in Missoula. So again, thank you for the conversation, and thank you very much for your comments, and appreciate where we go from here. So with that, that wraps up our regular business items this evening. And now we are back to public comment for items not on the agenda. If you've not given public comment on non-agenda items, we invite you up. If you've already provided public comment on non-agenda items, then we're wrapped up. And it looks like we are. I don't see anybody online. I'm not seeing any public comment online. All right. Great. Thank you all again. And with that, communications from the mayor, I will hold off on any communications this evening and turn it over to general communications from council. So I will start with you, Councillor Krask. Any comments from you this evening that you'd like to share?
Not tonight, thanks.
Okay, you bet, absolutely. Councillor Jordan.
I'll pass, thank you.
You bet. And Councillor Campbell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will pass.
All right. Councillor Jones?
I'll pass, thanks.
And Councillor Anderson?
I'm going to keep with the passing.
Okay. Councillor Cheryl?
Me too, I pass.
All right. And Councillor Becerra?
I was going to read a chapter from my dad.
The
pass,
art
thank
of
you.
communists. Thank you. Councillor Melson?
I'm going to break the trend.
All right.
Only because I want to explain my no vote on the UDC adoption timeline. So we heard from staff in committee last week that adopting the UDC framework by the end of the year will help set up projects for success during the spring building season. And that messaging was echoed again tonight by a colleague who emphasized that adopting UDC is essential because we need housing, and this is how we're going to build more of it. But I want to acknowledge something that commenters have been alluding to, both here in chambers and online, and that is the perception that this adoption timeline primarily benefits development interests. I'll be honest, I'm beginning to understand where that perception is coming from. Development interests are a stakeholder in this process, no question. But you know who else is a stakeholder? Every single Missoulian, alive today, and every single future Missoulian yet to be born. Our responsibility reaches far beyond any one project or season. So, in closing, I just want to remind my colleagues that adopting the UDC isn't the same as approving an extension for a subdivision. It's not a one-off administrative action. This is a long-term policy that sets rules and expectations that will shape our city's growth, our housing outcomes, and our city's character for decades to come. We can support housing production and still ensure Missoulians feel heard, respected, and included. Those goals are not mutually exclusive. And as we move towards adoption, I hope that we keep front of mind that this process should serve the whole community, not just those that are ready to pull permits in April. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mike.
Thank you, Councillor Melson.
Man, I was gonna pass, Melson.
He teed you up.
But I'm not now. I appreciate all your comments. I'm enjoying sitting next to you almost as much as Bob. But we'll see how code reform goes. I appreciate all that. I just think that it's important to note that this has been a 3+ year process, and that in that 3+ year process, some of these people who do develop housing have been waiting for multiple years because, and some of that's on advice from our staff. We've been saying, this code is complicated, things will make more sense. We're hearing feedback. We've also done significant outreach to the community from day one of that 3-year process. So I think it's more complex than implying that we're not listening to the community. I just fully and completely disagree with that, but I recognize that when you do a rezone, especially a community rezone, there are gonna be, what's the resident population of Missoula? Adults, 76,000 something. There's gonna be 76,000 different opinions on zoning. And we see this in projects. We see this when people identify as NIMBY. I mean, they want it in other places, they don't want it here. I think that's all important, but I also, as somebody who has said for years that one of the reasons I ran for council is I want my kids to be able to live here, like I grew up here and am able to live here. we are thousands of housing units behind in Missoula. And it's not going to get better if we keep kicking the can down the road. So look forward to conversing about this more and more the rest of the way.
All right, thank you for your comments. And I see some hands are raised online. Councillor Vasika.
Thanks. I just wanted to remind folks that we do not have council next week for the Thanksgiving holiday, so everyone travel safe.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. And Councillor Farmer?
I'll pass, thanks.
You bet, absolutely. Okay, folks, that does wrap up our council comments, which means it wraps up our meeting. I'll adjourn at 10:02 p.m. Thank you.